Hey everyone, it's Graham right before the beginning of the episode. I just wanted to apologize. We had a slight audio issue on this one where we didn't do a proper audio test, so Jack is using the wrong microphone. We still have all of his audio, but it is coming from a headset microphone instead of his nice microphone. That was on me as a producer to catch. I apologize. In addition, when we imported the files into our editing software, we lost about 1 second of audio, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that leads to a little bit of desync. I've done my best to go back in the edit and make sure that we're all synced up, and for the most part we are, but there are a couple of places where we might be a little out of sync, and for that I apologize. This should only be an issue for Well of Ascension. We're introducing some protocols to make sure that we're on top of our recordings for the next episodes, but I just want to get this out ahead of time, let everyone know. I'll catch you in the next one. Hello and welcome everyone to A Grain of Sanderson. My name is Graham Gilman, and I'm joined by Taylor Lane.
Hello.
And Jack McLaughlin.
Hello.
This is a podcast where we are foolishly attempting to read all of Brandon Sanderson's works in publication order. Today we are reading The Well of Ascension, the sequel to Mistborn, which is a deeply complicated and weird book. And I don't really know how to talk about it right from the back. So much happens in this book, and also nothing happens.
I think something I said a lot going into this was I've reread Mistborn a lot because I like Mistborn, and I remember liking Hero of Ages, but I could never get to Hero of Ages because I just never felt like rereading Well of Ascension, and I couldn't remember why for the longest time. Why do I remember not really enjoying that book? And so this was a good deep dive back into that. This is why I didn't like it as much.
Yeah. Do we want to do our one-sentence summaries?
Sure.
You two go first.
I'm scrolling back into mine. Yeah. What I wrote was a bunch of teenagers working out their crushes while the more interesting plot happens in the background.
That's true. God.
Mine was Brandon Sanderson used a descriptor other than good man to describe someone. Challenge level impossible.
It's also true. Jesus. Mine was you could cut 400 pages from this book if they just killed your dad first.
But yeah, so do we want to just start now with the summary?
Yeah, that makes the most sense.
All right. In the second book of the Mistborn series, the former thieving crew is charged with leading the first free city after the Lord Ruler's 1,000-year reign, and defending it from the several warlords and would-be emperors, including Ellen Venture, the new king of Luthador's father. We pick up a year after the events of the first book, with Ellen having established a constitutional monarchy representing both nobles and ska, and Vin letting her paranoia get to her as she struggles to keep Ellen safe from assassins. Somewhere else in the world, Sazed has begun traveling the world to share the knowledge that the Keepers have been collecting for hundreds of years with the newly freed Ska people. This newfound freedom might be short-lived, however, because not only do Straff Venture, among other former noblemen, march armies on Luthador, but the myths themselves are acting strange, killing people at seemingly random and lasting longer and longer into the day. The book is split between three primary storylines: Ellen, Vin, and Sazed. For most of the book, Ellen fights political battles to maintain power in the system he created and tries to keep the newly founded parliament from selling the city to one of the invading armies. He is deposed by a vote of no confidence, runs an election, and loses said election to a former nobleman, all while gaining lessons from a new terrace woman, Tindwyl, on how to be more like the great leaders and generals of old. Vin spends the bulk of the book sulking under the weight of guilt and anxiety, worrying that she is not worthy of Ellen, whether she can live a dual life as a woman and a Mistborn, and grappling with the more legendary implications that she might be the Hero of Ages as more and more events of the Hero of Ages logbook come suspiciously true. In addition, one of her friends may be dead, as there's evidence that a Khandra has replaced a member of the crew. There's also a love triangle with Ellen's insane Mistborn half-brother Zane. We'll get to that.
Damn it.
Meanwhile, Sazed, unable to stick with the quiet life of teaching, pursues a new mystery when, along with Marsh, he discovers a record from an ancient terraceman that details many of the events leading to the Lord Ruler's ascension, beginning with a warning not to trust anything not set in metal. As he digs into this mystery, more and more strange inconsistencies start appearing, including the prophecies he's recording changing to more accurately reflect what is happening in the modern day. Vin is approached by Zane in the night, who almost persuades her to leave with him. When Vin refuses, Zane betrays her, revealing that the Kandra spy was actually her Kandra. However, Vin and the Kandra have bonded, and Vin wins the battle by using a strong allomantic push against the Kandra, causing him to betray Zane, and a weird Deus Ex Machina defeat of Zane's Adium. I did not add that line. I actually disagree with that, and we're going to talk about it.
We will.
The book concludes after Elend and Vin are tricked into leaving the city by Sazed for their own good before the armies, including one of the monstrous Koloss, attack. They discover this deception, and Vin makes it back in time to help fight, but not before both Dachshund, Clubs, and Tindwyl are killed during the battle. During this battle, she discovers that much like the Kandra, Koloss can be controlled by powerful emotional allomancy, which she uses to end the battle. After cleaning up some loose ends named Strathventure, and declaring Elend Emperor of Scadrial, she goes to seek the Well of Ascension that she now knows hides under the Lord Ruler's palace. The prophecies told us that the hero must take, then release, the power they find in the well, which Sazed learns is a deception by an ancient creature that has been manipulating the prophecies hidden in the well, and that releasing the power would also release it. Before he can warn Vin, he is stopped by Marsh, who is unable to explain why he must kill Sazed. Sazed survives the encounter, but not before Vin releases the ancient evil, dooming the world to some yet unknown fate. Also, Elend is a Mistborn now.
God, we'll get there. We will get there. I hate it so much. Okay.
That I agree with. The only competent people are wizards.
Yeah. God. Okay, where do we want to start?
We have a lot to go into. One thing is we talked. You mentioned at the start of where it feels like a lot happens in this book, but also not a lot happens.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that a lot because this book is like the most middle book syndrome book ever I have read. A lot of stuff was happening with all this like political maneuvering and intrigue. But over and over again, the parts I found the most interesting, the parts of the book I genuinely enjoyed, were the parts that were setting up book 3. All the parts that had to do with, because there's kind of the dual story. There's the story about, the what do you do after a revolution? How do you hold it all together when these warlords that all have a bigger stick than you do come by to try and take it from you? Which has potential to be interesting. I don't really think the book hit the mark on it. But then there's also the story going on in the background about but there's these prophecies with the hero of ages and what really happened with the Lord Ruler, and there's the mist spirit and the mists acting weird. And I love this twist so much, but the prophecies that are changing in the moment to better reflect and better deceive Sazed and others as they read them, all of that stuff I found incredibly engaging and incredibly interesting. And I am so excited for us to get to book 3 because I forgot how much fun that mystery was, at least to me. And it made it feel like all of the chapters with Elend, navigating the legal system he put together, and Vin having another paragraph worrying about if she was worthy of Elend Venture. I just kind of want to skip past those to get to the...
It's wild how much better every Sazed chapter is than everything else in this book.
Yeah. I think...
Go ahead, Taylor.
I was going to just quickly say that, I think there's a reason Elend wasn't a main character in the first book, and I don't think he can carry... He was a huge major character, and his point of view was very dominating in this book, and I don't find him compelling enough to carry a book, and I think this book kind of proves that.
It's also just sort of Vin's story again from the first book. I guess in broad strokes, where it's he has one way of being, and he has to learn how to be somebody else for the job, for the mission he's on. Complete with a magical servant person to give him lessons on how to be it.
Yeah, God. We're going to have to talk about Tindwyl as well. It's frustrating because, I really like Tindwyl's voice as a character, but also abhor how she's used in the story. Oh, God.
Absolutely. We will definitely talk about that.
Every book has to have a character that gets a Terraceman steward to teach them how to be a type of person. They have to be really insensitive about the breeding programs upon meeting them. And then they have to be objectified throughout the whole book.
God.
That is the cycle.
I like how you mention upon meeting them, like it ever changes. Like that is never resolved.
I think I just remember like writing, like highlighting in my book and just wrote, "Oh, you dumbass," when like the first thing Ellen, or like it's like the very early on in meeting Tidwell, she offhandedly mentions having daughters,
right?
And Ellen's first thought is like, "Huh, I never would have expected that, considering the breeding programs."
Yeah, it was like, I guess she was never like touched by the breeding programs, and I was like, I think I also wrote something like, how is that the conclusion there? I thought you were supposed to be some sort of, I don't know, scholar.
Because like Vin at least has the excuse of like she never got an education, so maybe she just doesn't know that much about the world, and so she was like kind of surprised by Sazed's.
But Ellen knows, like, how terrible the final empire was. I mean, like, literally, like, the nobleman's, like, weekly activity was like, hey, let's go hang out with the Lord Ruler and watch him do executions. And, like,
right.
That's, like, something that happened so frequently. And, like, I'm sure Straff had a Terraceman. Like,
Probably.
He's a monster in so many ways. Oh.
Yeah, God, this book is, because it's like, it really does feel like 80% of this book I just kind of wanted to skim over. But then the parts I did like, I liked so much that it makes the parts I didn't like a little more frustrating.
It's weird. I like, maybe this is a hot take. Every single fight in this book is better than any fight in Mistborn. With maybe the exception of Kelsier versus the Inquisitor, but like every single fight is like stronger in terms of like imagery. It's easier to follow what's going on, and also they've introduced the new metal duralumin, which we didn't really go over in the summary. But duralumin is the opposite of aluminum. It consumes all your metal at once in the same way as aluminum, but instead of like not being able to use it and you no longer have access to your metals, it uses all your metals at once in one tremendous blow of power, which I believe is something that Taylor predicted on last episode. So,
exactly.
Congratulations,
Taylor was on spot with it. No, but I mean, it didn't come up in the summary because I think you mentioned this when we were talking about it earlier, or at least maybe I saw it in your notes somewhere, that like it's a really cool metal, but it has no story. Like it has no story bearing. It's just another cool gadget for the main character to use, which is fine. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And I actually do think it was kind of a neat twist when Vin finally like actually fights Zane, and Zane, you know, is fully masked off as like villain to Vin. How he's like, yeah, of course I've been spying on you, and I also know about this new metal that no one else has been like that you've been surprising everybody else with. I also have it now, and that just being kind of like a cool, like scary moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, talking about, like, the fight scenes, like, Mistborn was definitely set up where, like, we talked about this last episode, where, like, the answer to your problems are violence, and so also him, like, veering off of that, where, like, now the answers to, like, many of the problems in this book were, like, political maneuverings versus, like, punching your problems is, like, the things you came to Mistborn for are not the things you're gonna find in this book, which sucks. So it's like, maybe the fight scenes are better, but there's so few of them that it's like, maybe like it might feel like you're starved for like what you came to Mistborn for.
If you came to Mistborn for a heist, you don't get any of that in Well of Ascension. There is
certainly.
Like thieving or crew dynamics.
For every one of Brandon Sanderson's like series, we are going to see that time and time again. Where, because I know he does that for Mistborn, he does it for Stormlight Archive. I know he does that for the Defiant series, where he is just like he won't do the same genre of story twice in the same series. Like, book 1 Mistborn was a heist book. Book 2 Mistborn is a political intrigue book, and book 3 Mistborn is going to be something else. And then he does the same thing, and we're going to see this, he'll do the same thing in Stormlight Archive, where every book, it's like a different overall genre of story. And that could be interesting, because, I mean, actually, one thing I was thinking about, a comparison to another series, The Lies of Locke Lamora, another, like, fantasy heist book. First book, amazing. Such a good heist, so clever, so creative, so fun to read. And then the second book is just another fantasy heist story, and I kind of bounced off of it because it felt like it was just the same book again, just with a different target this time. Mm-hmm. So I actually kind of like that he tried to do a different type of story in the same world. I don't think he hit the mark. I don't think the political intrigue was done well. I don't think it was very engaging. But I guess I respect the effort. I would rather him do a different type of story than just do another heist.
Yeah.
I feel like talking about like this especially is like maybe a good time to bring up Elantris, because the more we've read Mistborn and now especially Well of Ascension, when you guys said that like Elantris is kind of this microcosm for like all of Brandon Sanderson's work, not like all of it, but I'm sure like the early work certainly, it has come more and more true as I've read on. I feel like you know, I see Harathan in both Elend and Sazed. I see Serene in Alrian and Tindwell. I see Rowden. Already forgot his name.
We're inventing new pronunciations every episode.
I'm sorry, did you say pronunciation again, Jack?
Listen,
oh no!
Listen, the word is pronounce, and then you add ideation to it.
I don't know.
I think it's stupid that it's pronunciation.
I don't know about that one.
The most ironic word to mispronounce.
Yeah, so Rowden is very much Elend in a lot of ways. I mean, this is supposed to be like a political book, and it's just tough because I think in Elantris, the politics were very strong, and I think that he's also like, it almost seemed like he stopped trusting himself as a writer, because I think what I loved about both Elantris and Mistborn was that it felt like every single chapter something was revealed, or like something like interesting you could like grab onto was handed out. And it's like, this only really ever happened in like one chapter where I was like excited to see this again, where Elend took charge, and he was like telling the Ska to like go or telling his people, I guess they're not Ska anymore, to go tear down the buildings and get wood, and people were like coming to him and like giving him like updates on like what's happening in the city. And I was like, okay, like we're finally getting to a point where we're back to like this like cool Elantris getting new information about what's happening every chapter kind of writing that he is good at. And then like it never really went further than that. It stopped after that one chapter, which also reminded me extremely of Elantris, because he made the point that like I looked it up. I'm pretty sure it's a very Calvinist idea where like work will save you, or like work is like what will bring back your like will to live, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it was hard to see that, I guess, and then see that he goes back to not really like trusting himself, and not like, I don't know, he's so good. I found him a very good writer because of how often he's revealing little bits of information, and when the bits of information flow really came to a screeching halt like halfway through this book and didn't pick up again until like the last 100 pages, I was like, it almost felt like he stopped trusting himself as a writer.
Yeah, I can see that a little bit. And also in terms of, this sort of segues into one of my points. You were bringing up, like, having the perspective of just Elend being in the city, working with the people, and, like, reclaiming wood from the great houses so, like, people don't freeze to death at night. One of the things that I think this book is really missing is this book has a House of the Dragon problem, which... so there's Game of Thrones, and then the HBO series House of the Dragon, which is based on, I think, like, the writings of George R.R. Martin, and also, like, his history book of his fictional world, which is about, like, the history of the Targaryens. Now, House of the Dragon is, like, pretty good. Like, visually, it's stunning. You can really tell that they have a $20 million per episode budget. And also they have all these great actors, and they're all doing weird freak shit. It's fantastic. However, one of the things that I think that show is really, really missing is, like, the perspective of just a regular dude. Because one of the things that makes Game of Thrones work is you get to see the interiority of all these extremely powerful people, and then you get to see how the consequences of that and how it plays out. And what House of the Dragon really lacks is that sort of, like, normal dude in all of this. Especially because it's all, like, a bunch of petty bullshit that's sort of happening.
I wrote down in my list of points as well that for a story ostensibly about the liberation of an oppressed group, the regular people feel like they have very little to do with the story at all.
Exactly.
And there's a very, like, casual, dismissive attitude, which is interesting because in Mistborn, this felt like that was, like, an intentional point. Kelsier, in the first book, gets called out for the fact that, like, hey, you're doing all this revolution stuff, but you don't actually care about the people. You're just doing this for pride or ego or whatever. So it's interesting that, like, the book calls that, the first book calls that out, like, doesn't follow up on that. It keeps doing that with the same characters. Actually, one of the reasons I think the Elend chapter that, Taylor, you were talking about, and this is very late in the book, this is after he lost the re-election to be king already. So this is after he's, like, this is actually basically once he's been kicked out of the politics. Like, he's been forcibly kicked out of the politics, and then he just starts helping the people. And that felt like the first time in the book where it actually felt like, wait, they're actually, here's the stakes. Here's the people. Here's the reason they're doing all this. Here's the reason they're defending the city, all that stuff. And that comes, like, 3/4 of the way through the book.
Yeah.
There's also something we mentioned really cool action scenes earlier. This is a particular pet peeve of mine for any storytelling. But storytelling that has really cool, like, action set pieces that just casually use regular background people as cannon fodder,
mm-hmm.
and then doesn't acknowledge the kind of horror of that. Like, for example, one of the coolest fight scenes in the book when Vin and Zane, this is after Zane had manipulated Vin into thinking that Ashweather Set, one of the kings, one of the ones that's, like, trying to take over Luthadel, has convinced him that, like, he's been convinced her that he's been sending assassins and that he's, like, the real bad guy. He's the reason this is all happening. Zane and Vin go to attack him in his keep, and it's this really cool fight scene. But it's also a fight scene where Vin is, like, slaughtering literally hundreds of people. I think the number came out to 300 people, and the book explicitly says, like, yeah, she kills, like, 300 people, and it's a super cool fight scene, a super cool, like, use of the power. And the book gives lip service later. And, like, later it's kind of treated as this tragedy of, like, everyone kind of reacting a little bit in horror because Vin just, like, went and, like, you know, caused a big political incident and, like, killed a bunch of people. And they kind of mention how, like, oh, man, she just killed 300 people. But then that's very quickly glossed over, and the focus is then more on the fact that, like, man, that's a big political misplay. And I think I need to get better about marking down pages with, like, specific lines I want to reread. But I think someone literally refers to it as, like, oh, but, you know, Vin, like, we're more concerned about Vin. We're more concerned about her emotional state. That must be really hard on her. Like, she went and just killed 300 people. And the focus is more on, man, what a teenage girl moment from Vin having an emotional episode. And that was just the vibe I got from that whole scene. And it really annoyed me because I'm like, I feel like we're not really confronting the fact that, like, a mass murder event just happened.
Yeah, and also speaking of like the oops teenage girl moment, there's so much casual misogyny in this book. Holy shit!
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
We got. Okay, wait. We talked about how in the first Mistborn book we didn't get any named. We didn't get many named female characters. Very few of them had any agency or power. This book does correct on that. We get 2 more like primary female characters of importance that both have magical powers. But that just increase. That's just more targets for the casual misogyny now.
Yeah. And also, sometimes it's not casual misogyny. Sometimes it's your lover stabs you because you were sleeping with his son and also were trying to poison him. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Hey, Graham, that's just romance in the File Empire.
Gosh.
That's just what the dating scene's like. It's on Stadriel.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Yeah, I just... It just was handled so poorly. I just, like...
Before we get into it, do we want to real quick just introduce like the 2 characters we're going to be talking a lot about, Tindwyl and Alriang?
Sure, yeah. I mean...
So, yeah.
Well, I think there's something like... before we even get into those characters, because there is a lot of misogyny, casual misogyny pointed towards them, but there's also just like more casual misogyny towards Vin before these characters get introduced as well.
100%.
I'm trying to find...
There's a couple of I remember 2 quite upsetting scenes before they're even... Are you talking about the sparring with Ham?
The sparring is one of them, but the scene that I'm thinking of is... yes, actually, yes. That's exactly it. The commentary after the sparring.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
They talk...
do you have the page number?
Which is a shame, because it ruins an otherwise pretty cool fight scene.
Yeah,
yes.
Let me... it's one of my... Here, let's be quiet so you can cut this out.
Cool.
Do you have I hate this tab or something like that?
Yeah. I have tabs that are like, we are talking about this. Yeah, okay. I have the we are talking about this tab.
This is... For context, this will be a scene right after Vin and Ham were sparring. And it's a pretty interesting scene because it kind of demonstrates how there's different ways that allomancy can be used and how very typical like measures of someone's strength don't necessarily apply. And it shows Vin being able to be very competent and cool despite being much smaller and physically weaker than Hammond. Just as they spar, and it kind of just addresses some like neat little quirks and tricks of allomancy. And overall, I think the sparring scene is just like it's fun. Like there's a cool. I always come back to this. I think there's a cool little description about how like Pewter gives everyone like a flat amount of bonus power. So you have 2 people that burn Pewter. They end up with the same difference of strength if they're both burning Pewter.
Okay, this is not a joke. It's page 69.
Okay. Yeah, I was about to get there.
Yeah, because they both burn Pewter, Vin is like a bug. I think it's described as like a bug. Like, yeah, she'll be physically weaker than Hammond, but because all that power is stored in a tiny little body, she can like leap 8 feet in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and the scene you're going for is like right after that sparring match.
Yeah, they're basically all sort of talking about like the whole crew is here. Crew.
Yeah, this is like Mistborn's, Clubs, Elend, I think maybe someone else. I don't know. Whole bunch of gangs there.
I think Breeze shows up.
Breeze. Yeah, Breeze shows up to say some of the most upsetting stuff, I think.
Yes, it's important to know that this book, despite the fact that Spook, once again, a slur, Lestibonus continues to be called Spook throughout this entire book. And he does say, like, this name was given to me by Kelsier, that's why I keep it. I still don't think Brandon Sanderson knew. But I do also think that in the sequel series to Mistborn, Spook is referred to, and he no longer is called Spook. He has a different title. So I think at some point someone was like, hey, Brandon. But we'll get to that. So to me, the most egregious line is right here, which is a Spook line. But you had met other girls before her, Spook said. Noble girls. A couple, Ellen admitted. Though Vin had a habit of killing off her competition, Ham quipped. Elend laughed. Now see, she only did that once, and I think Shan deserved it. After all, she was trying to assassinate me at the time. He looked down fondly, eyeing Vin. Though I do have to admit, Vin has been a bit hard on other women. With her around, everyone else looks bland by comparison. Jesus Christ. And then Spook follows up with, Spook rolls his eyes. It's more interesting when she kills them off. Which...
Oh god, and then also just not just towards Vin, but from Vin. Like Vin has Vin. What's the term? A pick me? Vin.
Yes.
Like that. Like increases the book. Like in Mistborn, she didn't really have.
She
that.
had it a little.
She at least has not as much. It felt like. I saw that look you gave me, Taylor.
I think the problem is Vin absolutely had this in the first book. The thing is, the first book had no women in it. So, like...
I think that might be it.
Yeah.
I feel... it felt like a sudden extreme... It felt like a jump to the extreme end of it, is I guess what I'm trying to get at.
And, I mean, I think a part of this conversation that is also so horrible is, like, the way... So, setting up the scene, like, Vin and Ham spar. Elend pointedly... Well, Clubs kind of forces Elend to, like, bet against Vin. And, like, Vin is clearly upset by this, and, like, we'll talk about that. I think we'll talk about that a little later. And then Ham, or someone, sends Vin off, even though she had just won, to go get them drinks. And then she's expected to pour drinks for all of these men. And then they proceed to talk about her like she's not in the room. And they're like, I'm pretty sure during that conversation she was standing there. Like, they talk about her like she is not even a person, is not, like, worthy of, like, being talked to. And
Elend
like
literally has his arm around Vin when he makes this, like, comment of, like, I'm so glad she killed my fiance.
Right? I just, in my notes, in my margins, I'm like, they exclude her, and she's like this silent woman who's playing the good butt of the joke. You know, she is the most competent woman, or she's the most competent person there, and they have to find new ways to grab power and to undermine her in order to feel like they can be, I don't know, not uncomfortable by her. I mean, that seems like a pretty good reading, in my opinion.
I mean, Spook literally says the most interesting thing women can do in this book is die. Which, like, is kind of true. Like, I mean, spoilers for a character we haven't introduced yet, but Tindwyl dies. And, like, I think literally the only reason Tindwyl's death needs to happen is for Sazen's character development.
Oh, for sure. I am extremely upset by that. I mean, there's...
Because we saw this a little bit in Elantris as well, but, like, you know, the point of that scene was meant to be, like, fun banter between a group of friends. And we saw that... I feel like we saw that in Elantris as well, where, like, Brandon would try to write these scenes which are meant to be, like, kind of, like, fun and tongue-in-cheek and just meant to be, like, banter between friends. But then it's like, why is that the banter they choose? Like, it comes, like, because I don't believe it was intended to come across as, like, oh, look at these men disrespecting Vin, but it really did. And so what does that say about, like, the perception of what fun banter among friends is supposed to be?
That I'm not... I think this is maybe a good time to talk about... I don't know. It was just very obvious, I guess, to me about how much people were... Like, most of the people in her life were very comfortable with just pushing past any discomfort that Vin ever expressed to them. If she had a boundary she wanted to set, everyone felt like they were entitled to push that boundary away from her. And, like, push, and, like, this is treated as, like, a good thing in the end. So, like, I'm thinking about, like, in this scene, actually, I think, like, very close to this scene, Ham claps her on the shoulder, and she's like, ooh, like, this casual touching is so weird. I don't like it when people touch me. but you know what? I need to be normal. Like, I need to be normal like other people. That's like, let me like be touched. Even though that was explicitly made her very uncomfortable. And ever since that, I clocked every time someone touched her and she didn't like want to be touched, because it was like, that's like very important to like your boundaries are important, and she just felt like she couldn't have any. And then there's and then they're in like the dressmaker's shop, and Tindwyl, a woman whose boundaries were crossed like for 20, 30 years of her life, was like, why don't you want to marry her? I've been thinking about this theme of boundaries and how they are constantly pushed, prodded, and I mean, I argue in the end, like, raped by the end is like she's questioning like why you don't want to marry Elend, and it makes her super, super uncomfortable, which is like, marriage is a big deal. I think she's entitled to not.
No, but the sad thing is that so much of this book, and this was like it was simultaneously like the most least interesting part of the book and also the saddest part of the book, but is Vin's internal monologue during all of this. Like,
oh yeah,
we get her internal monologue, and like the reason she doesn't want to marry Elend is she doesn't feel like she deserves him,
which is supposed to be a parallel to the fact
gosh.
that like Elend is insecure about Vin's power. And like he's constantly saying misogynist things where he's like, I don't really like how masculine she is, and how like she wears trousers now, and I like it when she wears pretty dresses more, and the fact that she's so strong emasculates me. And it's like, grow the fuck up.
Yeah, and she's got short hair now, and you know, I just wish it would be long. And dresses is the last one. Yeah, dresses is one of the last ones where like everyone's like, you need to wear a dress, and like Tindwyl literally calls her like the king's consort at some point, and like and like she's like, no, wearing dresses makes me really uncomfortable, and everyone's like, sucks, maybe you should anyways. And then she's like, okay, I guess, like, I have to. And
which is a bit of a break from last book, because I remember last book there was kind of a point where Vin was like, no, she genuinely likes wearing dresses, like that's a thing she enjoys doing, like she likes the beauty and the pageantry and the frilliness. Like, she enjoys it. But then she spends this whole book feeling like she shouldn't, or feeling like she doesn't have a point. And then when she tries to express that anxiety around wearing dresses during a very stressful point in her time, that's when people try to be like, no, you love dresses.
Well, I don't necessarily think that it's like,
oh my gosh,
you love dresses, you have to put them on again. I think this is one of the situations where it's more gray. The stuff where it's like people are touching Vin, or one that really came up to me a lot is how often people enter her rooms without knocking. Because like tons of people do that, and like she almost kills Tindwyl when Tindwyl like comes in and is like, hey, you want to go shopping? But the one like specifically what people are trying to do with like getting Vin to wear the dress, or at least Tindwyl is trying to do to get Vin wearing the dress, is like, hey, your political image matters just as much as Elend's, and like I want Elend to look kingly, and he should have a kingly consort, which like is a misogynist thing to think, and is also like
absolutely
is all about projecting power. But also I don't think Tindwyl is wrong. Like, it's one of the things where it's like, yeah, if that's what you're going for, you need to lean into this misogynist ideal. Scadrial seems to be, or at least I don't know if it's supposed to be, but what Sanderson has written is a misogynist world, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Patriarchy again, for sure.
Ooh, another. I wonder if you wrote this down as an example of boundaries being crossed, Taylor. But what I was thinking was, a lot of this book is also spent with Vin not making a decision about what she wants to be, and people telling her like various roles that she has to fill.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
absolutely.
For example, there's oh god, we're gonna have. I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about Zane, but there's Zane, who is Elend's quote unquote insane. Although there's a line at the end where it's like, aha, Zane actually wasn't insane, but then it's like, no, I think he was pretty insane.
We'll get to that too.
But regardless, we're like Zane. One of the big conflicts of the book, the big love triangle, is Zane coming to Vin and being like, "Hey, you're not from this world. you're from my world. You need to understand that. And so much of the book is him manipulating her into being like, here's what, like, and like, I don't think I'm against the idea of a villain being manipulative. Like, that's a conflict. But like the ease and naturalness with which Vin falls
Vin,
for
the
it,
most suspicious person in the world.
Yeah. Like, yeah, have the villain be shitty and manipulative, but like, man, oh man, did Vin fall for it so quickly. And so, but like, Zane is telling her, you have to be part of my world, we're not among them. Like, here's one of your options you have to choose, is coming with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also, even Sazed, like, one of the big moments of the book is Sazed being like, oh, Vin, you are the hero of ages, so you need to leave and go see the Well of Ascension.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, then there's Tyndall coming and being like, you need to be the king's consort. Basically, the whole book is like, Vin has to choose between a set of options that for who she is that aren't. There's never a point where it feels like she's making her own option.
Just speaking of that, like, Sazed being like, the like child-ish way of being like, you have to go see the Well of Ascension, like, it's out of town, of like, one, that shouldn't have worked on Vin, and two, you could have cut 60 pages from this book and nothing would have happened. Like, Vin still returns and saves the day. She could have just been in the city the whole time and we wouldn't have wasted 60 pages.
Well, the only thing that happened with them going out, honestly, it was like to have Ellen. This is we keep tangenting off into different topics, but one of my points I wrote was that Brandon really has his cake and eats it too, with the whole like Ellen being a quote unquote good leader thing, where it's like Ellen sticks to his principles, is a quote unquote good man who won't subvert the law or do anything underhanded to gain power, but then still becomes emperor at the end through no act of his own, through no moral staining of his own character, manages to become the autocratic emperor of everybody. Because and like that felt like the entire point of Vin and Ellen being set away was so Ellen could get out of the city. Vin comes back, fixes all the problems with incredible amounts of violence, and then declares Ellen emperor.
Yeah, and like with her like choosing, you know, one thing or another, people forcing her to choose. I mean, a very explicit like point in this book is like, is she a Mistborn or is she a woman? And I mean, like, I think that really brings up like a lot of interesting, or like it really brings up like the idea of like imposter syndrome, because Kelsier, a man who it really brings up that like being a Mistborn is very gendered, and Kelsier as a man never had to be like, am I a man or am I a Mistborn? And neither does Zane really. I mean, we don't really get his POV like in that kind of way, but like Vin can't be Mistborn and woman because like being a Mistborn is gendered to be a man, and Kelsier got to be the shining example of like what a Mistborn should be and stuff like that. And like I'm sure in the next book Elend will also not need to wrestle with this idea, because like Vin has this imposter syndrome where like the title was not made for you, and now she's trying to fit it to her. I don't know. Do you think that's true?
Which is a shame. I think that's true, and I think it's a shame because it feels like that's just going against one of the thematic points of the previous book.
Absolutely.
Like, it felt like a big part of the first Mistborn was Vin grappling with this being being an urchin, being a noble one, being a Mistborn. And then finding a way to synthesize all of those into who she is. And that was a really touching, really interesting, engaging story. And then this book comes along and it's like, psych, she actually has to be one of them.
Yeah. And also, like, now there's the additional complication of her being a religious figure. And, like, you've already set up the thing where, like, she doesn't want to accept that part of herself either. And it's like, if it was just that would make some level of sense of just like, oh, I don't want to accept my new place in this new Church of the Survivor. But instead, it's like retreading stuff that she's already sort of accepted in the book. Or in the first book.
Yeah, it feels like her character is resetting almost. It's like it's going back on what feels like character development we already had.
Yeah, to finish off the conversation about boundaries, since like we've established pretty well that like a part of this book was like Vin's boundaries getting crossed like all the time. Is that final scene. Actually, there's one more point I need to bring up before we can talk about where I think the climax of that resolves. And that is Orsur.
Yeah.
Orsur has very strong boundaries. We find out later that that's because she doesn't actually have the contract with, like, her, but I think that she starts to learn boundaries through him when he's like, I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. Like, that is a secret to my people. Like, I will not tell you that. And like, I think like...
And she accepts it. She's like,
yeah.
I respect that.
Exactly. And I think she, in the beginning of this book, never had any... No one ever taught her to, like, that her boundaries should be respected. Especially, you can tell that in her head. Especially, I'm thinking about, like, the ham scene where she, like, gets clapped on the shoulders and she's thinking, like, I need to be a normal person and, like, let people touch me. And, like, I think that doesn't happen by the end because, and I think a little part of that is Orsur and being, like, which ended up being tense.
Just to elaborate for any listeners who might have forgotten what a Khandra is or is not reading along with us, a Khandra is specifically a shape changer who can impersonate people, but they have to eat the person first, so the person has to be dead ahead of time. I am specifically saying this to my mother, who is probably listening and who has forgotten what a Khandra is.
We've been pretty justifiably critical of the book so far. But genuinely, some of my favorite parts of the book, which it's weird. This book has a lot of bad, a lot of like very justifiably criticizable stuff throughout it. But it kind of simultaneously has some of the best one-on-one character-to-character conversations in the entire series at the same time as everything else. I could not get over the Orsur and Vin conversations, the parts where they bond. That was my favorite thing to track throughout the entire book. Is just because they start like they start hating each other. They're distrustful, they're distant, they have this barrier up, and then that barrier starts to come down. We later learn that the reason that the barrier started to come down was because it wasn't Orsur anymore. It was a different Khandra that didn't have the same baggage. But then the conversations they had, like especially the one where they relate their experiences of abuse. I was eating that up. I was finding that so engaging, so satisfying to read, because it was like, oh, this feels like the first time in the entire series that Vin had someone that actually gets her, and it's the inhuman quote unquote monster. Yeah. Like,
it's also like, I agree with you that like this is some of the better writing in the book. Although I would say approximately 95% of the Khandra arc really works for me. And then the Khandra Tensoon, or in disguise as Orsur, reveals how Khandra, one of the ways that he says that Khandra can be detected is they're immune to emotional allomancy. But he also keeps saying that the Khandra have this thing in their people which is like a contract with humanity, which is sacred, and that cannot be broken, and like all these things have to be hidden about it. But he keeps talking about like being afraid of emotional allomancy, and that's the reason the contract was made. And Vin uses Duralumin to emotionally push on him, and like he freaks out, and it like causes him near physical pain of like how much this has upset him. And like the whole scene like really works and is like deeply effective and sad, but knowing that, and Vin has been like is ultra paranoid and is trying to spy on people throughout this whole book and figure out who the spy is. It's wild to me that like the next step isn't, okay, we'll get everyone in the palace and I'll just do one massive soothing push on them. So
Oh my gosh.
Because she now knows that Condra can be affected by emotional allomancy if she uses this like special new gadget she
and
has,
like
but
she never does do that, and it's like, why not? So like the final like climax of the spying thing of like, I know Sanderson just wanted that reveal, and it's like, okay, that makes sense, but like if you want that reveal, don't give us the tool for the reveal that early, like.
Oh my gosh,
because it now feels like for 100 pages, it's like, find the spy. You know how now.
Oh my gosh, no. I think it was far, far, far earlier than that. One of the first conversations, he was like, we can't use allomancy, and we can't be manipulated by emotional allomancy. And I was like, we saw Kelsier literally in the last book was like, really bad at like emotional allomancy, and like people would call out when he was like, get off my emotions or whatever, and so like she got Ceruleum way too early for that to, like, I would almost say it's like 300 to 400 pages where I was like, literally like the first time he had like revealed this, not even to like the like part where he gets the seizure, like literally like far, far before that, when he's like, just those 2 criteria, I was like, this seems really easy, like I literally wrote like, crank that soldier boy up to like 1,000% and like call it a day. That seems like a very clear, and that I think is something that Vin would have done in Mistborn, and like, you know what I'm saying, like I think she should have figured that out. She should have done that way, way early. And like, when I'm thinking about like Brandon Sanderson like not trusting himself, I'm like, this is like, why are you like making this
or
go
maybe
on
trusting
for far
himself
too
too
long?
much, because like the idea of like, I think Sanderson really wanted this betrayal scene, and like which is funny because the betrayal scene doesn't really work for me regardless, but I think in writing of this, like, if you go back and reread the Well of Ascension, like Jack and I have, it's so obvious from the very beginning that Orsur, like, has been replaced. Like, for example, Vin talks to the real Orsur and is like, hey, I want you to take a dog's body. And Orsur is like, this is gonna suck for me, and also, like, fur takes forever. And then the first scene where we see Orsur, or Tensoon rather, in the dog's body, Vin goes, is that why making this body took you much longer than you said? No, mistress, Orsur said. The hair. I'm sorry I didn't warn you. Placing fur like this takes a great deal of precision and effort. Actually, you did mention it, Vin said, waving her hand. And it's like, that's literally the first encounter. So, like, it's there from the very, very beginning of, like, hey, we want this spy to be revealed. And, like, they should have caught the spy. Like,
it's interesting that whether it's Brandon trusting himself too much or not trusting himself is because this is normally something Brandon Sanderson is really good at.
Yes.
Is exploring all of the implications of, like, his magic system. And we're going to keep seeing that. So, this book really does kind of feel like, I think I'm leaning more on Taylor's side of this, of, like, not trusting himself. Because it feels like between Elantris and Mistborn, he kind of figured out what his lane is. And then this book is like, there's the theme of imposter syndrome with Vin. It's also Brandon Sanderson's imposter syndrome.
Right.
Not to psychoanalyze, I don't actually know, but like it feels like him being sort of uncomfortable with the stuff he's actually really good at.
Which is like,
because he could have had Vin realize that potential way of finding the spy and found a way to make it interesting still. I think
I think as well. I think he could have. I think the natural progression of like how this would have worked in Elantris or Mistborn is like, she gets those 2 pieces of information and she's like off rolling, you know, she's like, yeah, like, this seems like a pretty simple solution, like I thought. Like, let's finish this.
And then it could have been a neat thing where she still assumes that, like, it can't, she just, because I do think it makes sense that she wouldn't think the Kandra has been replaced because they're like so in the background, so much an object that she wouldn't think about it. So maybe that could have led to a neat scene where, like, oh, I guess there isn't a Kandra. Like, she uses that tool to convince herself that there isn't a spy.
Yeah.
And that could have then been interesting on its own.
And it would have worked for the, insecurity arc that he was writing. Like, I don't, it's just...
Oh, because she would have, like, found this cool strategy that theoretically worked, but then it didn't, and then
exactly. So then
compiles on top of her insecurity.
Yeah, it would have worked, and it's just upsetting that she doesn't get to be the smart character we all know she's supposed to be. I think I want to talk about the Zane betrayal scene.
I hate this scene so much.
Cause I read this. I'm interested to see how you guys read this, because I think that this is the climax of of Vin's boundaries getting crossed, because I think there is a very sexual undertone to this.
Absolutely.
Fight.
This is another sexual assault scene.
And this is a sexual assault scene. And it's so obviously, like, I don't know. The fact that Vin also didn't see this coming was upsetting to me, because, like, basically he was like, I love you, and like I love you, come be with me, like, you have to come with me. And, like, when she was like, no, I don't love you, I believe that you love me, but I don't love you, I'm not gonna come with you, he then got violent from that. He was like, he couldn't control her, so now it's time to kill her. Like, if I can't...
We needed the incel representation in the book.
Yeah, if I can't have her, I want to kill her. And I think the biggest marker that this was a sexual assault scene is that you find out, like, about a few chapters later that Amarata, the person that Straff uses to bring
his
back
herbalist.
to his herbalist, and like, yeah, she's like 28, and she's used up or whatever, and Straff knows that Amarata and Zane had been sleeping together because Amarata has a scar on her breast. And where does Zane hit Vin the hardest? And one of the 3 wounds he gives her is straight in the breast, which to me is a very, very clear, like, sexual assault imagery, rape imagery.
Considering Brandon Sanderson usually shies away from direct, obvious sexual imagery, I did notice that, like, he didn't say he stabbed her, like, in the chest or something. He said he stabbed her in the
breast.
And
also, like,
breast.
we get this reveal later, of Amaranta having slept with Zane. And apparently, according to Straff, this is, like, Zane's signature move of, like, doing violence to the women that he sleeps with. So yeah, your reading is absolutely right.
That's his calling card. That's his calling card is stabbing the woman that he, like, sleeps with in the breast. And so certainly if Vin did not win this fight, if Vin ended up
there's also the fact that
I don't think
Zane
it would have
kisses
happened
her as well.
Right at that's it's all disgusting.
If this wasn't intentional by the author, it was a, like, gross oversight, and just, like,
even if it is intentional, like, it's a weird thing to put in your book.
It's very sexual.
This might be an interesting thing to talk about just as we go on reading more of Brandon Sanderson's books. And I know we're only on book 3, so we don't have a lot of material of this, but, like, we want to talk about, like, his growth as a writer, or, like, how he changes, or, like, common themes. I wonder if a potential common theme is essentially, like, where Brandon Sanderson has blind spots for the implications.
Yeah,
he's
I mean,
giving.
that will come up more and more. Taylor, do you have any further thoughts about this scene?
It's interesting that this is the huge turning point for her personality, is this is he treats this as the way that she gets over her insecurity, but like she had to have like that ultimate boundary crossed in order for her to like stop being insecure.
Reader,
it's just
listener
horrible.
at home or someone who's read along, it's important to remember that the literal next scene after this weird like fight sexual assault scene is Vin getting married to her boyfriend. Literally the next scene.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that upset me so much. Yeah, if some man just like jumped on top of me and like was clearly like hurting me because I didn't love him, like becoming violent because I didn't love him, my next idea is not like, I don't know, I think I would need a little bit of space from men for a second, like maybe just a second, like maybe the next day, maybe, you know, like just a moment. And also he looked exactly, they also canonically look very similar. If a man who looks just like Ellen, a man who looks just like Ellen just assaulted me and had weird sexual undertones about it, I am not turning around and being like, I don't know. I did not like it. I thought it was icky and gross, and you're so right. And she, like, it's weird how, I mean, I guess it's like centered her life around men, but this book is entirely centered around men. There is no, like,
even
every
uninteresting
woman's life
men.
in this book is centered around men.
But like also in terms of like her getting married, like the only kind of relationship that this book can imagine as successful is monogamous, like romantic love. So like almost every relationship turns into monogamous romantic love, even when it's like, I don't know if that works on the page. So like Vin and Ellen getting married is like the only thing this book can conceive of. In the same way that like this is what happens with Sazed and Tindwell. This is what happens with Breeze and an 18-year-old girl.
It's monogamous romantic love, and then whatever Breeze and Ham have going on.
Yes. Listen to the post pod. We talk about how Breeze and Ham are gay.
And speaking of Tindwell, so Tindwell is a Terrace woman, so from the same culture, ethnicity as Sazed, and she is also a keeper. She's also a Furicomist. She has been, gathering the collected knowledge of other keepers, and her particular focus, while Sazed's is religion, her focus is like great leaders of the past. I think she specifically says great men of the past. So like
it's not just great
kings.
men of the past, although that's a lot of what she's has. Her copper mines are mostly biographies, so not just great men, but biographies in general.
But so her thing in the book is that she comes to Luthadel to basically teach Ellen, like, hey, we've had one emperor for 1,000 years. No one knows how to be a leader. I'm here to teach you how to be a king. And it's probably the most interesting part of Ellen's story is like him learning how to like dress up better, how to be a king, how to be more assertive, all that stuff. But Tindwell also then kind of slots into this odd motherly position to Vin. And there's a constant reference to the fact that, she's a mother. She has a lot of kids. She's raised a lot of daughters. And that's kind of taken as like a point of her experience to like her like understanding Vin, Vin being a emotional teenage girl that she is. But then Tindwell's background is that, much like Sazed, she's a victim of the Terrace breeding programs, specifically in the fact that she was a breeder. I don't know if there's a better word to say for it. Like her role was that to this breeding program, was she had to give birth to a lot of people to grow up to be Terracemen stewards.
Yes, so specifically to remind the audience again who might not be reading along with us, the breeding program for the Terrace stewards, like they have a eugenic breeding program specifically to breed out the sacred Terrace magic system of Furukame, which works similarly to Allomancy in terms of like you use metal to draw on power, but it works in storage of like I will spend an hour being weak so I can have an hour being strong later. And that sort of thing. But Tindwyl is a full Feruchemist and a keeper, so she specifically volunteered herself to be one of these, breeding women, so that she could produce more.
The program, yeah.
Yes, so she could produce more Feruchemist children.
I almost didn't get that she volunteered.
I think there was a line which mentioned she volunteers, but then is still ended up really resentful of the whole process because, of course you would.
I think that,
and also
yeah,
even if she volunteers, she exists as a part of a slave class. Consent can't really exist there.
I also would like to remind you that she had her first child at 14 years old.
Yes.
So that's also
and she had children for 30 years.
So that means she volunteered when she was 14, when she was a child.
Yes.
Right.
So...
And I think she the Synoid, which is the keepers who are kind of in charge of the Terrace people, they saw sneaking her into the breeding program as a great victory. And I just was very disgusted by that, and I was happy that she got to mention that she was disgusted by that, but literally no other character in the book is sympathetic to this, or...
Except for Sazed. But, not as much as he should be.
Not as much as he should be.
And also, something
which
else
makes it, especially gross that her ultimate role in the story is to be a romantic interest to Sazed, where it, a romantic interest to Sazed who dies for character development.
Yeah. Although I do like Taylor's point in your notes of, there's a queer reading of their relationship that's kind of interesting, but also I don't know if it fully works.
Yeah.
But in terms of, there's also this weird, hero worship of Sazed, and also, Sazed is specifically a rebel in Terrace. He's been outcast from the Terraceman Senate, where all of these, keepers and Feruchemists and Terrace peoples, Sazed is the only one who, or according to the book, Sazed is the only one who is I don't want to just, win a victory over the breeders. I want to destroy the fucking final empire. And he's successful at it. And, the implication there is, if only we had fought back at all, we would have collapsed the final empire. And it's well, I think things really aligned in a very specific way. Not to say that, you shouldn't do revolution. Absolutely the Terrace people should do revolution. But, Sazed got lucky. So, for the book to lionize him so much at the expense of the rest of the Terrace people really sucks.
Absolutely.
And, it makes him seem like the only smart Terraceman when, and, in a way, almost, reinforces their oppression. I don't know. It's disappointing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, and the whole Tindwyl breeding stuff also really leans into the kind of, inherent eugenics theme of a world with genetic-based superpowers.
Yes, it's also important to know that Tindwyl is also a black character. Specifically, not all the Terrace people are black or people of color, but these two most certainly are.
Oh, very.
I think there's even official art that shows that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
The thing is I guess this is a very tiny spoiler, but kind of shows Brandon retroactively realizing some of the implications of his books, but it takes until Era 2 and a couple books into Era, or I guess it happens in the first book, for someone to kind of in character get mad at the eugenics going on.
Oof.
And the kind of eugenics stuff kind of inherent to it.
Something that I really noticed that I want to bring up is the fact that so we talked about how Tindwyl, her thing is biographies, and specifically great men. So she, has 20 different children with 20 different men, and her job is to read all day long and learn all day long about men. I found it sinister. I found it quite sinister that is, like, it's very upsetting. I don't know.
And also, it's important to remember that these copper mines were given to Tindwyl. She didn't get a choice about what to select from.
That's actually not true. The way it works is that every keeper gets the collected knowledge, and then they essentially, like, every copper mine is the same. Like, they
No.
have...
She had specific copper mines. This is mentioned, Jack.
Yes.
Like, she only was able to read the biography copper mines.
Mm-hmm.
That is specifically in the book.
Because I always read it as like Sazed has, all the stuff about medicine, history, that stuff, but like that stuff is just stored away while he takes an active interest in researching all the stuff with religions.
Yes, that is correct, but there is a specific line of Tindwyl is given the biography copper mines. It is not her choice.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I must have missed that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because it has to be, like, snuck in to the breeder program.
Right.
It's such a shame. I guess we can talk about her as this sort of mothering figure, and this would be... we can talk about the dressmaker scene, because that would be a good way to tie in Alrain, or Alrianne, or however you want to say her name. But... so Tindwyl has been, like, training Elend, and one of the scenes in the book is Elend gets a makeover. Like, Tindwyl comes in, puts him in a white suit, specifically a military uniform, and... she's like, okay, we're gonna cut your hair now, and Elend's like, no, I like my hair long, like, what the fuck. And then like, Elend looks in the mirror and is like, oh, look how hot and kingly I am now, I have to cut my hair, and like gets the haircut. And there's like not an entire theme of like clothes make the man, but there is an element of like, this scene, I think, actually is quite good. Brandon Sanderson is weirdly good at writing dress-up scenes and, like, people getting ready. But, like, this does seem to, like, help Elend get more confident. And I just like watching this sort of scene in fiction of, like, how a person gets ready, how a person falls into their role. And one of the scenes where we see this as well is, like, again, this is sort of, like, leaning into more of this sort of magical Negro stereotype that we talked about in the first episode of like a black character who specifically exists to fix all of the problems of this white character's life. But like, this is literally what happens with Tindwyl, which is disappointing because I do like this scene of like, Tindwyl is like, hey, let's go dress shopping with Alrain and Vin.
After breaking into Vin's room.
As we mentioned earlier. Yes, and Vin almost kills Tindwyl. And literally growls at her. And then
listen, I'm okay with Vin being like a feral child. That is okay. A characterization I am okay with.
So then they go to this dressmaker's shop, and like Tindwyl has all these speeches about like, what do you want to be? Like, what role do you want? And like, it's supposed to be like, Vin is supposed to accept this feminine part of herself as well. And she's getting a dress made. And like, most of the scene is like kind of okay. I don't really love Tindwyl's back and forth of like, I'm here to fix you. But I absolutely adore this scene where Vin tries on the dress and she's like, one, I really missed this. I do actually like my feminine side of myself. But two, there's this great scene where Tindwyl starts being like, okay, and here's the measurements for how you should make a dress for a Mistborn. And then she says, this will suit Lady Vin, I think. And the dressmaker hears Lady Vin and is like, oh shit, this is the heir to the survivor. And immediately is terrified. But then immediately also follows it up with like, oh, I've made dresses for Mistborn before, and comes out with like the coolest dress you've ever seen. It's got pockets for medals and shit like that. I mean, any dress that has pockets, already a banger.
It's like it's like designed to tear away in a fight. Like the frilly bits are like designed to tear away in case like she gets in a fight.
Exactly. There are places for her to keep her daggers hidden.
Wait, and that's then just like another, like, we talked about how this book gets weirdly into you're either a Mistborn or a woman, and then this scene reminds us that like, no, like we were told in the first book that like Mistborn are too rare to care about whether they're a man or a woman. And this kind of shows that, like, yeah, like, they're not like, this guy's not some kind of genius who had to come up with, like, oh, we have this new crazy thing that we never expected, a Mistborn woman. He's like, no, like, we're prepared for this because this is a reality that half of all Mistborn are women, and, you know,
Yeah.
make a dress so that they can, you know, kick ass.
Let me see if I can find the scene, because there's a specific section I want to read, but if I can't find it, it's not a huge deal.
And I guess while you're looking for that, because Alriane is also in that scene.
Yeah.
She's the other important named female character that kind of joins the cast. At the beginning of the book, Breeze is missing because he was off spreading rumors, specifically spreading rumors in Ashwater or Ashweather Set's territory, and like kind of being an advisor to him. And then like he escapes after like performing some big political maneuver. One of the big parts of this book is like there's 3 armies that want to attack Luthadel, but none of them can attack Luthadel because like then the other 2 armies will attack them. And Breeze brought one of those armies. But while he was pretending to be advised to the king, he sort of started a romance with the king's 18-year-old daughter. And it's this kind of thing where, like, Breeze is, like, constant... Oh, we didn't talk about emotional alliancing that much in the last episode. I think there's a lot more to talk about it for this one.
Graham,
but,
it's around 280.
Okay, thank you. I was looking much later in the book.
But, like, Alraine shows up, and, like, she is, like... Her whole thing is she's introduced, she's frilly, she's pink, she's girly. Definitely a lot of like, oh, she's like airheaded and only cares about feminine things. And then she turns out that like, no, she's actually one of the most manipulative of the bunch. She's actually a really good spy and like one of the most manipulative of the bunch. But she's there for that dress scene, and she's kind of one of the people along with Tindwyl kind of pushing Vin to be like, no, be feminine, be pretty, be pink. All that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just be feminine. It's also, like, by the end of it, they are like, she's like, gosh, I don't want to be, like, the hero to them, because there was, like, a crowd that gathered outside recognizing Vin. They also were, like, forcing her into the role of, like, a religious figurehead, too. So, 2 different ways that Vin was pushed where she did not want to be pushed. And I think
although she does sort of grow to accept the religious figure towards the end of the book, but again, like,
that felt like the most unbelievable. Like, of all of the roles she could have accepted, that was the one that I believed the least.
Yeah, which is frustrating because, like, that I wish that's what the book was about. Because that, again, that's a stronger arc than, oh, can I be a girl and a fighter? Like, we've seen that before. And, like, we've seen that before, like, in literature and in the previous book.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, Vin grows to accept that pretty quickly in that first book. So, I don't know why it takes almost 700 pages in this one.
I wanted Alriane to be a Mistborn so bad.
Yeah.
So bad. I wanted...
Vin needs a Mistborn girl best friend.
I wanted the Watcher to be a woman so bad. I just kept writing it. I was like, it's not going to happen, but it could be. It could be.
Yeah. It's also disappointing that Alriane, like, while her arc is, like, she's one of the better spies and she is sort of interesting, at the end of the day, like, while she does something cool at the end of the book in bringing her father, Ashweather Set's army, back to Luthadel instead of to conquer it, this time to liberate it, ultimately her arc is still, I pushed a man to do something. Like, I have no power of my own.
I don't know.
I think it kind of works, but, like, I would have preferred the reveal to have been like, oh, she's pulling the strings the whole time. Like, well, her dad is her bitch.
Well, you mentioned the gray zone earlier about, like, you know, the world is a misogynist world, and so, you know, it makes sense that Tindwyl has to kind of dress up Elend in a specific way. But, and I think that kind of applies here, too. Like, it's almost showing us, like, you know, this is a misogynistic world. Here's how a woman will still have power in this world.
Yeah. Taylor, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I almost disagree when she like had her like iconic like running down the hill on her horse and she turns around and she's like, well, you're gonna have to like come after me if you want to protect me, and then she like runs off. I was like,
that was great. I actually really love that.
I love her so much. And I wrote in my margins, I was like, women have been commanding armies through the mouths of men forever. And like, that's just kind of how I saw it. I saw like she was commanding this army through her father. Like she was the person out front, like, and I really loved it. And like, she knew she couldn't do it, but she was like so empowered. So like, I don't know. She knew who she was, and she like.
I want to flash forward to Stormlight Archives so bad, because that's like that theme comes up again where it's like, yeah, all the men are generals, but like the women are kind of making decisions
we
too.
can talk about that in December, Jack.
I'm just excited for my friends to read some of my favorite books and tear them apart in front of me.
I wish she had
and
more
we
moments
already
like
think
that,
Well of Ascension. We already think Well of Ascension is too long. God, when we get to Way of Kings and that book is fucking 1,100 pages,
and that's the shortest one, right?
That's the shortest one.
Yeah. It's like each one is about as long or longer than the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Each one adds about 1,000 pages to the last one. Because Words of Radiance is about 1,200. Oathbringer is about 1,300. Or 100 pages rather.
Yeah, 100.
But I do kind of want to segue because I had a lot of thoughts about this and I want to talk about it, and this ties into our game. But emotional allomancy. There was an attempt this book to give it almost like Graham, you put it well, like give it a redemption of a sort. Because last book, and I think we touched on this a little bit, our representation of emotional allomancy is Breeze, who is very much presented as this like very what's the word? Kind of like sleazy old man, like very like, oh, everyone go get me my wine. Oh, I'm in control here. He's always kind of like touching people's emotions and like manipulating them. And emotional allomancy is this kind of like inherently kind of creepy and scary thing. Like, oh, these people have a power to emotionally manipulate you. And I feel like there's a lot of interesting ways to engage with that. But then it's not really engaged with. And then this book, we get some Breeze point of view chapters where we get to see inside his head and his thoughts of emotional allomancy. And it's like sort of tried to give it a redemption where like Breeze has this philosophy, kind of dual philosophy. One where it's like, you know, he's just such a good person that he's constantly using it to help people. Like he's walking along a hallway. He passes some serving people, some servants who are like doing some work, and he uses emotional allomancy to make them more chatty so that the work passes quicker. And then once all the battles start, he's using his powers to like make the soldiers braver or like soothe away anxieties. And like even just talking to his friends, he's constantly like I think there's a scene where like Vin notices that even while Breeze is like arguing with Elend about like a strategy, Breeze is still using his powers to make Elend more confident, like even as he's arguing against him. But it also gets a little weird where Breeze writes something where he's like, oh, people, soothing gets a bad rap because people think it's manipulative, but it's no more manipulative than like a pretty face getting you what you want.
It's important to note that there are other characters who say it's nothing more than a pretty face. Breeze specifically says it's nothing more than a low-cut bodice.
Right.
That too.
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting to this point where like the treatment of emotional allomancy is a little weird, and I'm talking around one of I know Graham's favorite scenes also, which is kind of ironic. But like. There's this great. He also in his internal monologue, he thinks a lot about how like he never touches Auriane's emotions. This person he has this like love interest thing. Like he like actively avoids it because he's like a good person. It's framed as this like he's just such a good he's a good person. He does this because he has really strong principles. And then like immediately the next scene, we learn that Auriane actually has the
Rioting.
the matching power, rioting, and has been actively rioting Breeze all the time, and is like trying to get him to fall in love with her using emotional allomancy.
Yes, it's complicated in this book because I wrote down, I'm stealing this quote from somewhere. Breeze is a romantic who desperately wants to be seen as a cynic. And like, he is fundamentally a good man, which again, Brandon Sanderson used another term other than good man. But he's fundamentally a good man who wants to be seen as a bad man. So he's constantly boosting his friends through emotional allomancy, despite the fact that he's also like getting into fights with them and seeming like he is more of a bad man than he is. Now that's all fine and good for the context of like Breeze, but like not every man is as good as Breeze, or as Breeze seems to be in his internal monologues. So like,
Right.
this does a lot to redeem the emotional allomancy, and like I do think it leads to a lot of great scenes. For example, Allrain rioting, or Breeze and Clubs have a fantastic conversation. But
Once again, this book has a lot of bad in it, but then just randomly pop in like some of the best dialogue writing and character talking scenes.
Yeah, occasionally it hits the mark for that. But again, like fundamentally, this is a creepy system. Like,
well, I mean, I'm sort of on the side where like there exists you writing a book with a magic system that can be kind of creepy and abusable in isolation isn't a problem. Like, you know, it's that could be a neat source of conflict that like, oh, we have to worry that there's this really manipulative magic out there. But then it's never treated as like kind of manipulative and creepy as it is by the narrative.
no.
Like appropriately.
No.
Again, and like Vin, the character we're supposed to like, is constantly soothing people.
Oh, yeah.
And like another thing of like, Vin constantly is like learning to set boundaries and doesn't really have her boundaries respected, but is also constantly using wizard like emotional manipulation magic on them, and it's like that's also not okay. But I think the text doesn't think it's. I think the text thinks it's okay.
Yes.
But I don't think it's okay.
Yeah, no, and it's like at the start when we were talking about like kind of ignoring the autonomy of like the regular people. We were talking about that scene where Vin has to kind of accept she's a religious figure, and the first thing she does when she goes out to talk to them is start soothing all of their emotions to like make them like chill out and like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talked about how like so. I think Brandon Sanderson, in his inability to come up with literally any other way to describe a person or a man, everyone's a good man. Like, and they have no other character personality. They're a good man. I got so suspicious of this. And so, like, I don't know. Is Breeze a good man? Like, maybe on the inside, but, like, sometimes I think that we are our actions, and his actions are, like, not very good. I don't really think he's, like, I don't know. I don't really think it's fair to call him, like, a good man. I don't think he's like a good man.
No, I agree. Like, I do think that, like, we are absolutely our actions, like, as well as our internal feelings. For example, this book redeems Ashweather Set because he liberates Luthadel at the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, this man is like a monster. Like, he's a terrible warlord. He's clever, and he like wants to hide that to seem like he isn't as savvy a political figure as he is, and then he can surprise people. But like he treats the enslaved Ska like in his kingdom terribly.
Mm-hmm.
His intention when he takes Luthadel is to re-enslave the Ska. Like,
yes,
explicitly.
So like all that shit like sucks, and like, but also I believe that since this book believes him to be an honest man, the book also believes him fundamentally to be a good man, despite the fact that his actions clearly show otherwise.
No, he's not a good man.
I'm gonna make a connection to the Forbidden series, but it almost has a similar problem that Harry Potter books have, where like it's all good people are clever, witty, fun to talk to, have good banter, and are honest. And then that flips around to be the same thing, where if they are clever, witty, fun to talk to, are honest, they are then also a good person. Because, like, right around the same time that we get Seth's redemption, is also when we get, like, the scene with him and, like, we have the scenes with him and Vin, we have the of him at dinner, he has the scenes with his daughter, and all of them, it's like, he kind of comes across as, like, a kind of likable dude, like, just in terms of his bearing. Like, he's just,
absolutely.
He's outgoing, he's charismatic, he's honest, he has horrible intentions, but he's kind of a charming guy while he does it.
Yeah, he's Straff's foil.
Yeah, and then, like, Straff is, like, Graham, I know you wrote this in your notes, is, like, comically evil. Like,
comically evil.
It's like they are just stacking more reasons to hate this guy.
Yeah, and, like, at a certain point, I just stopped caring about how evil he is. Because, like, it's like, oh, not only is he, like, is sexually assaulting all of these women, he's also a child predator. And it's like, okay, like, you can only do so much in terms of making him more evil.
And also, I wish I had the words to describe how this made me feel. It made me feel something. But learning that Straff, not only did he keep a lot of mistresses, but it was also part of a super clever political play where the reason he had all these mistresses were so that they could give birth to potentially more allomancers, that he would have, like, a secret squad of allomancers.
There's so much eugenics in this book. There's so much eugenics in this book. Jesus Christ.
I can't wait till Era 2 when people actually start getting mad at the eugenics part of the story.
Oh my god.
We're like it's the text finally catches up to be like, it's kind of fucked up that all these superpowers are genetic and what that leads to.
Yeah, no, there was definitely a part in this book where I was like, if you have the last name, like, Venture, no man with the last name Venture is a good man. I was so mad at Elend, I was so mad at Straff, I was so mad at Zane. All three of these men needed to shut up.
Listen, Vin already has a really good track record of killing people from that family.
Yes! Keep going, girl! Keep going!
She killed the bastard son, she killed the father, she killed the potential, like, in-law. Like, it was...
also, to be fair, she technically gets Elend killed, too.
Yeah! At the very end!
I mean, she does also then eventually save his life, but she does kill him.
Yeah,
or get him killed. It's a mistrace that kills him, right? I was not paying attention.
She makes what happens at the end is, oh god, like, this is the part of the book I genuinely love, but, like, the part with all the mystery and stuff. But, like, the whole plot with the Well of Ascension.
Well, actually, before we get to the Well of Ascension, Taylor, did you want to make your broader points about Elend? Because this is, like, a big shift in terms of.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, this is a pretty big shift.
We're gonna take a break, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. All right, we are back. If you're ready. All right, no, Taylor, you can take a bite of your food first.
No, this is like my snack on the side that I've been silently eating.
I have a bowl of food as well.
Yeah, just to keep me, going. Anyways, yeah, so before the break you asked about how I felt about Elend, and I don't know. I don't think that Elend's brain is a very pretty place to be. We are told by the narrative 100 times that Elend is a good man, but being inside his brain is kind of odd and weird, and he has a lot of weird prejudices that are, like, make me think. So, like, just to begin with, I think the way that he characterizes Vin, and he thinks about Vin, especially in those early chapters, he's looking at her and she's like a strange creature who's, like, small, and then he, like, she's so tiny, like, he's always, like, thinking about how tiny she is, and then, like, this also gets flipped, and he starts, like, sexualizing this, like, a little later on, and then there's, like, a certain point where he calls the ska, like, exotic. They're, like, exotic and interesting, like, the ska, he, like, loved, like, to, like,
the people he grew up around his entire life but just didn't notice. Right,
yeah, he's like, I loved studying them, they're so exotic. And I was
specifically the enslaved class. Like, it feels so much of like an extremely rich like white 20-something being like, oh, I love hip-hop. Of like that sort of thing.
What's it called? Like poverty tourism or something? Like there'll be people that go around, I don't know, maybe that's a stretch of a comparison.
No. It's like a little similar. I don't know, like poverty tourism has like a kind of specific definition, which isn't quite this, but it's like in that vein of like
it's racism.
Aestheticizing the poor.
We can call it racism. It's racism.
Yes, it's racism.
It's racism. It's just racist. He's calling the ska exotic. It's just racist. And I mean, he does the same thing to Tyndwell. That's also just racist. Like he just doesn't want to listen to her. And there's, like, very little other reasons why, like, I guess maybe because she's a newcomer, but that even, like, she stops being a newcomer pretty quick. And he just,
and while
like,
the ska are, like, pretty broadly unraced, like, it's at the very least classist, but definitely racist in terms of, like, God, we can get into it further.
in the first, like, in this book, he's kind of, like, eliminated the whole, like, nobility and ska are different races thing and like kumbaya or whatever, but it's not kumbaya. There's like you set that up, and just because you never mention that the ska were seen as a different race for 1,000 years doesn't mean that there's not huge like ripples that like are not gonna go away for a very long time. Like every single nobility in this book still definitely sees the ska as like a different race. And then there's like the last part that we talked slightly about yesterday, which is like seeing the Lord Ruler as like chill and like the trains running on time thing.
Oh God.
So like when I say like
the Lord Ruler oppressed us for 1,000 years, but he kept it stable.
Right. Ellen's brain is really not a pretty place to be if you apply like even an ounce of criticism to it.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the type of like very online political theorist person who just like wants to debate everything because it's interesting to debate and these are interesting ideas to explore. But then like the topics he's debating are very real topics that like other people actually live through.
Right.
Like the kind of the example.
I just think a person's humanity should be up for debate.
Absolutely.
Well, because the example that comes to mind first is like you'll see this type of thing where people like are debating whether transness is real online, and it's like for a lot of this type of person, that's just like an interesting intellectual exercise, and it's like, well,
no, I don't think that's giving them too much credit. Like they know what they're doing. I think like a lot of it. I think for Elland, it may just be an intellectual exercise and he wants to think about these problems of race. But the problem is, like, he's, like, lived in his entire life from a position of privilege and doesn't have anyone to listen to on these issues. And the book's not interested in giving those voices either. The most we get is Sazed, and Sazed is also a voice of, well, I disagree with the culture that I've come from. Mm-hmm. So, like, we don't have to listen to them either. But no, I think giving them too much credit, you're giving to them too much credit of like, oh, I just want to debate if transness is real. There's no debating on who gets to be people.
Yeah. Aloy, you are so in the way. What are you doing?
Jack's beautiful cat.
She has things to say about Well of Ascension.
To briefly, I know it'll probably be in the post-pod, but we should get it in the main podcast as well. But like, the Lord Ruler keeping the trains running on time, of like, this book really starts to redeem the Lord Ruler, in the sense that like, the book is like, well, the Lord Ruler was evil, but he did keep this great evil at bay. Maybe he's just misunderstood, or was like the wrong person for the job. And it's like, no, he was still like a fundamentally evil overlord.
And we learn eventually that God, I'm forgetting his name, but like the terrorist men that wrote like what the epigraphs are. Oh, it wasn't a murder of passion where Reshek, like the ancient past, like where the actual hero of ages was killed. It wasn't a murder of passion and rage and a desire for power that led Reshek. It was he was like specifically tasked with stopping the hero of ages because the hero of ages was unknowingly about to release a much greater evil.
Or could have. Like, we don't know. Like, this dude Alendi, who is the hero of ages, might have actually just solved the problems. I think that is like a reading of like he was not the right dude, and also there's this whole thing of like the future being manipulated, but also like I don't know, he seemed like an okay dude.
Alendi. Well, I think that was the point. Was like Alendi was a good person, but so convinced that what he was doing was right that he wasn't seeing the like manipulation or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
Like that was kind of the point. Quan was like, I don't want to kill Alendi, but I'm not going to convince Alendi.
Yeah, he's like Alendi's my boy. I don't want to kill him at all.
But so it becomes like it becomes the Lord Ruler, despite being an evil, did actually save the world from being destroyed.
Yes, which is frustrating. I wanted to bring up. This is such a weird and specific reading, but one of my favorite paintings is a painting called Liberty Leading the People. You can see it in the Louvre. I highly recommend just looking up an image of this painting. I will put it in our chat specifically so you guys can see.
Oh, it's a classic one. That's the French Revolution.
No, it is not the French Revolution. This is what I wanted to bring up.
I need an art history education.
This is a French Revolution. But not the French Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
So, Taylor, this is the painting. I'm sure you've seen it a million times.
Yes.
So this is a painting called Liberty Leading the People. It is by Eugene Delacroix, I want to say. Let me double check that. I don't want to... Yeah, okay.
No, you're right.
It's huge. The painting is something like 12 feet across. It's enormous.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this beautiful, beautiful painting. But specifically, Jack, I'm glad you said this is the French Revolution, because it's not. This is the July Revolution. And this book is inherently suspicious of revolutionary ideas, The Well of Ascension. Dockson's final arc is, I'm sorry I had all those revolutionary ideas. It is my time to die now. I'm glad I didn't do anything worse. And it's like, that sucks. That sucks so hard.
Yes.
And in terms of like the reason I'm bringing up this painting is, in The Well of Ascension, there is no reign of terror. There is no reason that like the French Revolution has like this brutal side to it. The transition to Elend being king after the Lord Ruler dies is relatively peaceful.
Absolutely.
So
like the only chaos is happening in like outlying provinces. But, like, actually where the revolution happened. In Paris, basically. You know,
things are relatively peaceful. So, the reason I find this painting fascinating is... Here's what happens, loosely, after the French Revolution. After the French Revolution, there's the Reign of Terror, and then Napoleon Bonaparte becomes the Emperor of France. I think we as Americans constantly forget that Napoleon is after the French Revolution. Then Napoleon gets deposed and then gets reinstated. And then, after Napoleon is finally, completely gotten rid of, guess who takes the throne? But the Louis they killed in the French Revolution, his brother takes power.
Mm-hmm.
So, like... this is something that is said often, but like revolutions often come all the way around. But like that's literally what happened in France. Of like they deposed a king, they got an emperor, they got the same king back basically.
Yeah.
And then this July Revolution is to get rid of that same dude. Of like it takes constant vigilance and effort. And the thing is like we have no reason for this same skepticism in Well of Ascension because the revolution goes fine, and which is weird. It's a weird thing to put in the book, and like. If the book wants to be skeptical of revolutions, be skeptical in this way where, like, real revolutions have a reason to be skeptical of in something like this, of, like, be wary of the people who are trying to take the power of the people and use it for their own ends. Look for the Napoleon. Look for the Louis the 16th? I don't know.
I mean, in this analogy, Elend is the Napoleon.
Yes, Elend is the Napoleon. But, like, here Napoleon gets to be, oh, but he's such a good guy.
Oh, I know. Oh, my God.
Now Ellen's keeping the canal boats running on time.
Exactly. And God.
Also, once again, I know I already said it, but like, it's so funny to me that Ellen literally got to stay quote unquote morally pure, because Elend did not want to be emperor, did not take any action to be emperor. He got to be, I am a good person, I want parliament, all that stuff. And then Vin just said, yep, he's emperor now, and everyone's like, okay, sure.
Yeah. I will have to cut that point down in editing to make it more coherent. But, that's just what I wanted to bring up with that specific painting. I will also put the painting in the show notes for folks. Do you have any final thoughts about Elend?
I have a topic that I want to bring up before we get to the end.
Okay, yeah. This is the time.
I think, yeah, this is my last topic that we haven't talked about. But I think it's interesting how many main characters... I want to talk about disability a bit. Because, Brandon Sanderson has people who are disabled in a way, and I think it's just interesting how little he says about disability with the amount of people, or not the amount of people, but how important these people's disabilities are to their characterization. I mean, obviously, especially Clubs is literally named after his disability, is named after his leg.
His club foot, yeah.
His club foot. And that's every single time someone calls him that name, it is...
Not to mention, this book uses the term cripple so much.
Yeah, it's...
Which, unacceptable term 20 years ago. Brandon Sanderson should know this.
Something, I mean, obviously, we learn about Clubs' name in this book, a little bit better. It's pretty explicitly said in this book. And then we're introduced to Zane, who we've been calling insane.
The Watcher. Yeah,
we've been calling him insane because he has auditory hallucinations, which are disabling to people. People in the real world have auditory hallucinations that disable them, and the way that this is treated in the book is very interesting, where he's I'm a rational person though, and I can just ignore them, ha 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 ha, I can. And
but then he's also muttering to himself about no, I can't kill that person. And
it's I know that this is written off later as magical hoo-ha or whatever, but
he doesn't actually have auditory hallucinations. That actually is some entity speaking into his head.
Yeah, but that okay. Well, just because it is a person speaking into his head does not mean it's not auditory hallucinations.
Yeah.
I just think that there is maybe anything he could have said about that other than just you can shrug it off, LOL, I don't know. I thought that was a missed opportunity.
It's a thing that cool, competent people can overcome.
Right, yeah. And if that's something that disables you, then LOL,
or
shrug it off.
I don't think I've ever seen Clubs walked somewhere. I've only ever seen Clubs hobbled somewhere.
Yeah.
The whole book.
And also, this book has, you're right, Taylor, to bring this up, because this book has a lot of weird feelings about disability. Because one of the things that, one of the few places where Vin stumbles, Ashweather Set shows up, and he's hey, I'm super confident, Ashweather Set, unfortunately, has swag. A little bit. He's he's a shitty dude, but he does have it just a little bit. He shows up and he's hey, I'm going to show up at your assembly even though I know you could kill me, because I'm going to declare myself the new king, and all that. It's a pretty cool scene.
I'm running for election.
Yeah, I'm running for office. It's the coolest campaign ad of all time.
Oh yeah, for sure. He has it.
And then, he's disabled. Mm-hmm. He walks around with crutches, I believe, and his legs.
No. He's carried around on a pallet.
That's right.
He's fully in a wheelchair.
Yeah, his legs fully don't work.
His legs fully don't work, and Vin immediately goes, "Well, obviously this is a lie, and he's Mistborn." Vin, much like Brandon Sanderson, is incapable of conceiving a competent person who is not a wizard.
Right. Right. I'm very happy that in the end he wasn't.
I don't actually. I mean, I guess I'm curious about your reading, Taylor, because I didn't think about it this much in the moment, but rereading the book, partly because I had read it before, I read it as like intentionally obvious that he wasn't. Like, I read it as you're supposed to understand from the beginning that this is Vin being over paranoid, but I guess a lot of that was influenced by me having read the book before, and I know that Set is not Mistborn.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if, like, did it come across to you as, like, obviously Vin is being over paranoid, or were you thinking it was an actual mystery? Like, is he Mistborn or not?
I mean, at that point, I was just really upset that everyone was, like, gaslighting Vin into, like, seeming like she, like, yeah, she's, like, paranoid, but I hated how everyone was just like, you're paranoid, you're paranoid, you're paranoid, and, like, was like, Finn is right, yeah, no, so that, like, to me, like, anytime they were like, oh, she's just paranoid about this thing, I did think that, like, Chet could have been a Mistborn or his son, and so that's why I was, like, really excited, because I thought Alrianne, his daughter, could actually be a Mistborn, and that was, like, the bluff that he was doing. He was like, I don't want that girl back, you can keep her, when in reality, that was actually a huge blow, and he was trying to, like, downplay her in order to, like, get her back in some way, and then when she wasn't a Mistborn, I was like, no, okay, well, no one's a Mistborn, that sucks. No, I actually was, like, I actually had no clue if he was Mistborn or not until that final scene where she shows up to him and is like, I'm gonna kill you now, I just killed 300 people, and then he was, like, actually scared for his life, and no one would fight her, and then I was like, oh. Yeah, no, I didn't know.
So, on your notes for disability, you have Clubs and Zane, and we already talked about Set. Talk to me about Straff. What's your disability reading there?
Addiction. I think it's interesting that our evil guy got forced to have an addiction, and as I like, because trying to, like, figure out my notes, because I was catching on that, like, this weird disability thing was happening, and it's like, I think it is a good thing that, like, so, like, there's two different perspectives here, right? There's, like, the disability perspective, where I don't even know if addiction was in the DSM, whatever it was at the time then, because I think it's a relatively new addition to the DSM-5. But then there's also, like, a public health perspective, where, like, showing the evil guy as, like, as with an addiction is, like, a positive thing for, like, that he did, because, like, you don't want people to be addicted. So, like, I got to the point where... But also
you don't want to, like, criminalize addiction either.
No, you don't want to criminalize... Yeah, you don't want to make them, like... He's just so, like, overly evil, and then, like, another part of, like, him being evil is, like, that he, like, got addicted, and he's, like, an addict by the end of it to, like, a drug.
He's a rapist, he's a child rapist, he's addicted, and he's a horrible dinner host.
Right, like, that doesn't...
Just added to his list of crimes.
It doesn't see... Like, I felt very icky when that was, like, a point that, like, made him evil, and then I thought about it a little more, and I was like, but there's also something to be said about, like, addiction is a public health issue, and, like, showing addiction as, like, bad and evil is also, like, is not, like, fine, but, like, it's like it depends on what boat you're in, it depends on what lens you're looking through.
Well, it's a very complicated issue that had very little to do with the story at all.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
Like, what was it? It was like
set piece.
It was like the whole book. We thought that Zane was repeatedly poisoning Straff, and what we learn is that he wasn't poisoning Straff, but Straff's herbalist had intentionally gotten him addicted to drugs to make him dependent on her, because despite him being a rapist that tossed her aside because she was, ancient and withered old hag at 28, she was, like, getting power on him through that way or whatever. And then we learned that he was never actually getting poisoned, he was just experiencing withdrawal symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, like, that's, like, a total of, like, 20 pages. Like, he learns that he's actually been made addicted. He strangles to death the woman who is doing this to him. And then he just starts taking cocktails of drugs until he feels better. And then he dies. Like, it's...
Yeah. it's not really well explored. The other thing is, like, again, biography is not the answer to everything, but I do think there is a Mormon reading of this, in the sense that people who are Mormon don't drink alcohol. They don't even drink soda, typically.
Coffee either. Caffeine is a no-no.
Yes. So, like, mind-altering substances are, like, a big deal in terms of Mormonism. And part of the reason is because fundamentally agency is extremely important in Mormonism, of, like, being dependent on your own actions. And responsible for your own actions. And I think that's a huge part of Sanderson's magic systems as well, of, like, Feruchemy is, like, kind of the most Mormon of all these magic systems, because it's most dependent on the self. But the idea that specifically Straff is a villain because he is addicted, he cannot control his, like, impulses. I mean, Dune just came out, in terms of not your character in our D&D game, but Dune 2 the movie specifically came out, and, like, the reason that the Baron Harkonnen in that book is a glutton is because that series is all about mastering the self. So to show that he's evil, he's a fat person. And, like, the same way that, like, that upsets me and doesn't really work for me in this, the addiction plot, if it had been more developed, maybe. But, like, it just seems like another way to villainize Straff. When, again, I think for the most part, like, people with addictions just need, like, compassion and support and, like, government programs. So, like, yeah, but it is also disabling, but I think it mostly just exists for, like, a scene for Straff to do violence to a mostly innocent woman again.
It's also I think the most, like, mechanical plot reason for it to exist is, I just remembered, it, like, knocks him unconscious for 3 days, and that's why Ellen and Vin are able to get away. Like Brandon was like, I need Straff to do nothing for 3 days for the plot to work. Okay, he goes into a drug withdrawal induced coma.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just thought it was cool to talk about, and I'm happy we got to talk about this. I love your reading, Graham, by the way. That was, like, I don't know. That was, another point where I was
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I set it up, and then you said what I was trying to say.
You set up the pins, I knocked them down.
Yeah.
Something I want to make sure we talk about, just looking at the time, if we're done mostly with talking about, like, the political intrigue side of things, is at the very start, Graham, you mentioned how you thought the best parts of the book were Sazed. We've barely talked yet about, like, what Sazed's plot actually was.
Okay, yeah.
And to give some, so in the background of all this political intrigue, there's, of course, the kind of mythology element. At the very start of the book, Sazed, being directed by Marsh, who's acting all creepy and weird and out of character, all of a sudden.
We should elaborate on that specifically. Marsh, like, shows up and his voice has changed. And also his speech has changed a little bit in terms of, like, the patterns of things. For example, Marsh shows up to, like, Sazed teaching in class and is like, hey, I need to chat with you because... and specifically when Marsh shows up, the Ska peasantry are like, the Lord Ruler is here.
Yeah.
And Marsh shows up looking terrifying, and, like, he specifically refers to, in the previous book where he's talking about the Steel Inquisitors and how much he hates them, now he's talking about them as my brothers.
Brethren.
And specifically he wants to take Sazed to go investigate, like, a Steel Inquisitor hideout.
It was like it was some kind of, like, it was like the local enforcement fortress or whatever.
I think it has special significance to the Inquisitors. It's not just, like, local. It's like, this is a special sacred place. Like, the place is called the Conventicle of Saren. And it's, like, this special Steel Inquisitor palace. And I guess part of the reason...
That's abandoned, because all the Steel Inquisitors have gone missing for some reason.
Yes.
All of the other ones.
And we get the reveal why in a scene that should have been much longer for how important the reveal it is. Holy shit.
But they go to this place, and that's where Sazed discovers, written in metal, this, like, biography, confession, historical account by Quan the person who first told Alendi, the hero of ages from the logbook of the first book, was the one who like told him like, you're the hero of ages, and then eventually betrayed him, and is the reason Reshek, the Lord Ruler, killed the hero of ages. And it's this whole mystery because at the same time, there were reports of the Mist killing people, and this is a like fascinating...
It's also important to say that Sazed is finding... sorry to interrupt, Jack, but Sazed is specifically finding the epigraphs to all of the chapters.
Yes, the epigraphs to the chapter are all snippets from this. And the first line, talk about like banger first lines, is, I write this record in steel, for anything not set in metal cannot be trusted. And then the first thing Sazed does is take a rubbing of it, a non-set in metal rubbing of it, files it away to study. And so Sazed and eventually Tyndall gets involved as well, go into this whole discovery thing where they're kind of picking apart the past and they start to notice all these weird inconsistencies, like all these weird like logical things that don't make sense. Just in terms of like the sequence of events that happen. Man, it's like we keep being told Alendi's a good person, so why doesn't Quan trust him to release the power, which we keep seeing in these prophecies is the thing that like he needs to do. And then, like, we start getting this thing where, like, hey, Vin is, like, matching up really well to the prophecy of the hero of ages. And we eventually learn that the reason there's all these logical inconsistencies and the reason the prophecy is matching up to Vin so well is that this entity trapped in the well has some kind of power. He has the ability to, like, influence text and, like, not people's memories, but, like alter the world in small ways. So he keeps modifying the text Sazed had taken down to like make it fit. There's this great scene where like early in the scene, Quan refers to himself as the announcer, the person who finds the hero of ages, like very early in the book. Mm-hmm. Later in the book, Sazed is referred to by the Church of the Survivor as the Holy First Witness. And then Sazed is rereading that part of the prophecy, and it now says Quan refers to himself as the Holy First Witness. One of the big things that's being changed is when he's reading the prophecy later, it's like, wow, the person who goes to the Well of Ascension has to release the power. That's the only way to like defeat the deepness or whatever, which we learn that the deepness is the mist. Actually, in a great example of Vin being like actually just being smart. Like she makes that connection that the mist is the deepness. But then we learn that one of the things that kept getting changed, the original text of the prophecy or Quan's reading, is that the hero must not be allowed to release the power. And that was the thing that kept being changed. Is like, no, the hero should release the power. You should do this. And then that turned out to be like a big deception. And then at the very end, Vin goes to the Well of Ascension, and the mist spirit that's been kind of stalking her, which we still don't know what that is yet. We don't get a reveal as to like what exactly that is. What it does is it keeps trying. It is like against this voice. It is trying to like communicate like, no, like this is wrong. You shouldn't release the thing. And one of its gambits is at the very end, it stabs Ellen like a mortal, fatal wound. I don't think he fully dies, but like he comes like within a hair's breadth of it. And the reason it does that is so that Vin, when she gets the power, she'll be motivated to take the power so that she can use it to heal Ellen instead of releasing it. But then Vin makes the heroic choice, decides to let Ellen die, and releases the power, which turned out to be the bad option because that releases whatever was trapped in the well.
Yes, it's also Ellen would have died if not for the secret extra metal that turns you into a Mistborn. I hate it.
Yeah, no, there in the well there was like a couple beads of metal that turns out that if you eat this metal, you turn into a Mistborn.
And this is where the first Allomancers come from. Before we get to that, and I can go on an hour-long rant about how much I fucking hate this. One question I just wanted to ask. Jack, do you remember on your first read, did you pick up on this twist?
No, not at least until the last parts where they start like pulling attention to it.
Taylor, did you pick up on it? You're on this read.
That the
text was changing.
That the text was changing. No, I did not.
I was so excited. Like I wrote in my notes, like I want to see if Taylor picked up on this because I knew the twist, so I was like watching that like a hawk and being like, aha, there it is. They didn't say that. And just like the whole reading. And I had a lot of fun with while rereading the book.
Okay. I did the first time, but only in one element. I caught this. Alendi's height struck me the first time I saw him. Here was a man who towered over others, a man who, despite his youth and humble clothing, demanded respect.
And then later...
Yeah.
And then later, it's changed because Vin is so much shorter than everyone else. And the line is, here was a man who was short of stature, but seemed to tower over others due to his aura, or whatever.
Yeah, no, the height thing was like, I was like, oh, like, that could be her or whatever.
He's not amazing at intrigue, but man, oh man, does Brandon Sanderson do, like, mythology-based mysteries, like, magical mysteries really well.
This is one of the things that, like, really sort of sours me on the Well of Ascension, is I wish he had just written that book. I'm gonna bring up another weird book, I'm sorry. But one of my favorite books is A Canticle for Leibowitz, which I got first introduced to through, I think, the Fallout series, which it's one of the inspirations for the Fallout series. But the premise is, like, the book exists in 3 sections, 100 years after the apocalypse, or somewhere around there, 1,000 years after the apocalypse, and 3,000 years after the apocalypse. And, like, everything sort of goes terribly in a, like, nuclear holocaust. The sort of world that survives through is one that, like, you can see a lot of in Fallout in terms of, there's all these, like, Fallout shelter signs and stuff like that survived, and, like, be wary of Fallout and stuff like that. These characters, who are religious, because, there are enough religious people that, like, these ideas of Catholicism survive, but, like, the details of what Catholicism is don't really survive. So people see these signs of, like, the dreaded Fallout, and they go, oh, clearly that's the same as, like, the Christian adversary. So people stop referring to the devil, and they start referring to Fallout as the devil, and stuff like that. But, like, the reason I'm bringing up this book is, like, this book is a meditation on religion and how religion forms and how it changes over time, and I think Sanderson could write something like that, because consistently, the stuff that's strongest in his book is faith. And, like, I know he doesn't want to be thought of as just, like, a Mormon author, but, like, or just a religious author, and often he says, like, his religion doesn't play a huge role in his text, and it's like, man, it should, because, like, it's really strong when you do.
He definitely enjoys it, because that's another thing he does in a lot of his books, which is he sets up a mythology, and then you slowly learn what that mythology, you, like, learn the true events that mythology was based on, and, like, how it changed. Like, that's a huge part of his books, and honestly, it's a thing I've stolen often for running games of D&D, because I enjoy it too.
Yeah, I mean, he takes these, clearly there's something in that he is interested in, which is this character who loses faith and then comes back to it. This is why, I mean, I read Harathan, so I know Sazed's arc coming up. Like, I knew how deep and dark Harathan went from being, like, seeing his religion as very logical, falling down into a deep pit and coming back out super, super faithful. That, like, seeing Sazed go through this same, like, he's, like, halfway through that arc right now where he's in the depths of, like, not being faithful to anything. He likes characters who lose faith and find it again. And I don't know. I don't think that that's a problem. I think that that's just something that he was interested in exploring at the time, and that he shouldn't try. I don't know if he should.
It's a point to note that so far in the end of Well of Ascension with Sazed is him losing faith. He has not regained his faith yet in Well of Ascension. So look.
No. I mean, like, the final lines about Sazed. Yeah, the final lines about Sazed.
Oh, and him losing his faith. Him losing his faith is, like, basically what Tyndwyl, because people keep asking Sazed, like, what do you actually believe? And he, like, deflects the question. He doesn't think about it too much. And then Tyndwyl dies, and that's when he actually gets confronted with, wait, shit, I now actually have, like, a reason to really care about the spirituality where the people I love go, and I'm realizing I don't actually have, like...
Yeah, despite being an expert on religion, he is essentially an atheist. So Sazed gets this huge reveal. He goes back to the the conventicle of Saren, and he finds the secret cave with this writing, and he reads it again, finds all of the things that... It's also important to remember that this entity can not only alter the papers that Sazed has taken, but alter his memories. They can alter the memories stored in copper mines. So he reads the real text of it. Alendi must not reach the Well of Ascension because he must be not allowed to release the thing that is imprisoned there. Sazed sat back. It was the final blow, the last strike that killed whatever was left of his faith. He knew in that moment he would never believe again.
Tune in next time.
And that's the end of Sazed in this book.
Tune in next time.
Exactly. It sets up a really dynamic and exciting next arc for him. I'm excited.
And I talked about Terrace and talking about, setting up the next book. We mentioned the Inquisitors disappearing, and this kind of goes into what I think I said at the start with my one sentence about how there's a much cooler story happening off screen. What sounds like a cooler story. It turns out whatever the Inquisitors were doing was attacking Terrace, the Terrace land, and killing all of the Synod, basically killing all of the Keepers, all of the actual Furychemists, leaving basically Sazed as the only one left.
Mm-hmm.
It's also important to know that not only do they do this, it's specifically, once again, with how scary the Steel Inquisitors are, we have this reputation. I think they say something of there's 24, maybe, who do this, maybe less. And something between 12 and 24 men take out a country. Of just to show how powerful the Inquisitors, but just the power of allomancy is in general.
Marsh shows up and he's standing guard to prevent Sazed from revealing the truth to Vin before she's on the path to do whatever this entity.
Once again, the fight with the Steel Inquisitor is the coolest fight in the book.
True.
This fight between, Marsh and Sazed is my favorite thing. Might be my favorite fight scene we've seen so far. It fucking rules.
Because it repeats that, Sazed has these incredible magical powers, but he's not a warrior. He doesn't know how to fight. He just has crazy powers and stuff. And, it's kind of set up as this, Marsh is oh, you're not a warrior. You might have powers, but you're not a warrior. And it's well, Marsh, neither are you. You also just have a bunch of crazy powers. That I think this all the time. Whenever I watch superhero shows, I'm watching Invincible now, where there's people that are just super strong and super fast. I always think it'd be so cool to see these people have these crazy powers. I would love to see them know how to fight and have these powers. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Imagine if Superman also knew martial arts.
I mean, if you want that, it's Avatar: The Last Airbender.
True. Unfortunately, all the Furychemists are dead now, except for Sazed. But I
Last Airbender.
Last Airbender. But I always thought it would be cool to see what a Furychemist warrior actually looked like. A person that had Furychemist powers and did know how to fight with them. I think that would be actually pretty cool.
And maybe we'll get that in Arrow too. Maybe there were some who survived. Also, just while we're talking about the destruction of Terrace, we get this reveal. I wish this scene was longer, and also I wish the destruction of Terrace. I wish there was a Terraceman there, and not just fucking Elend and Lestabonis.
And it's not even a Terraceman. It tells him it's Hoyd.
Yes, it is. It is Hoyd in disguise as a Terraceman. That is the reveal, Taylor.
That's where Hoyd was. No.
Taylor's jaw is on the floor, listeners.
I'm sorry? What?
People had to keep asking Brandon Sanderson, where is Hoyd in this book? And the only reason they know is because Brandon Sanderson told them it was the person leading the Terracemen back to Luthadel. Because and here's the thing, this is not a spoiler because we only know this because of Brandon Sanderson saying this, is Hoyd was on his own mission up to Terrace, which originally the way it was described is Brandon was Hoyd was looking for the Well of Ascension in Terrace. And he was up there.
And also, it's important to note that not only is Hoyd specifically looking for the Well of Ascension, he is also looking to become a Furychemist himself.
No, technically, that's a retcon. originally, in the original writing of the book, Hoyd was up there because he was looking for the Well of Ascension, and it got retconned because Brandon Sanderson realized there's some like weird contradictions with later things in the book, later things in the series. It was retconned, so he's up there to learn about Furkin.
Okay. We will get to the cursed book when we get to the cursed book.
Mistborn Secret History. Listen, a lot of people love that book. I hate it with a passion, and we'll get to that.
We will get to Secret History in June of 2026.
Shout out to June 2026.
I think this is possibly an interesting talk because, like, Hoyd to this point has been a background Easter egg, has been this cute little thing. Brandon Sanderson did, did in a lot of his books, unpublished and published. We just had this same guy in the background.
Also, we did not bring it up in our Mistborn episode, but Hoyd briefly has a conversation with Kelsier, and like he shows up for like basically 3 pages, and it's like
he's acting as an informant. It's a background Easter egg character.
Yeah.
But in this book, this is the first book, a published book at least, where Hoyd has an impact. Is doing things, but it's purely in the background. Only the author knows what's going on. Yes. So it's like,
well, he does arm the Elantrians too. That's something.
Well, he's one of the people who, yeah. It's just that this is like the start of Brandon Sanderson being like, no, Hoyd is actually doing something, like has some kind of plot going on in the background, but you don't actually learn what that is until you get to Mistborn Secret History, because up until now it was just a like it was I think it was like the words of Brandon. Brandon described it as very much a just for him thing. Like he knew what Hoyd was doing in the background, but then that never showed up textually in this book, and we don't learn until Mistborn Secret History what he was actually doing. And at that point, by the time Mistborn Secret History comes out, Hoyd as a character in the Cosmere has already been established as like more than just a background Easter egg.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where Hoyd was. He was disguised as the Terraceman leader, leading the Terrace to Luthadel for safety after a whole bunch of people got killed by Inquisitors.
And again, currently he's like a Stan Lee cameo. Like it's not super important. Like by the time we get to Stormlight Archive, like he will be an actual character with a voice.
I just can't believe that like he's not Terraceman.
No.
So he was. That's just so horrible. That's not.
We do not hear about the destruction of Terrace from any Terraceman.
Yep. Hoyd is pulling a Sachin Littlefeather.
As far as we know, do we get a scene where Sazed learns about this?
Nope.
Even?
I don't think so. Because that would have happened. Let me double check the epilogue that Sazed doesn't like think to himself.
I don't think he does.
The only acknowledgement of the destruction of Terrace, like Terrace's role in this, in the destruction of Terrace, which once again, honestly, I think would have been a more interesting story if we were following what was going on up there. But in the book as it exists, Terrace exists as a place to get destroyed, to be an intimidating foreshadowing of like, oh my god, what were the Inquisitors up to?
Yeah, which sucks because like Terrace 1 seems really cool, and also like it's like misery porn. Like it's not again, it's just to fuel people's arcs or like to hit a plot beat. We don't really interrogate like what would this cost to the people.
And then I know you'll only be more mad once you learn what the Inquisitors were doing up there, or like why they did it.
Mm-hmm.
I have some theories.
Oh, right. Speaking of theories, one thing I want to make sure we touch on is Taylor. While we were talking outside of this, you mentioned, man, Brandon, when are you going to release the third? When are you going to reveal the third magic system? It's been 200 pages and you haven't shown us any new like magic.
Oh
like,
my god, that made me so angry.
I wonder what you think about that now, having finished the book, or if you still have theories about that.
So, I mean, my theories include, so I thought that, so there's Furukami, and it seems like Furukami, my guess was that it was made from a good version of the Well of Ascension. I think that the Well of Ascension, I guess we find out later that like he could like manipulate like all of life or whatever, so he like put the Well of Ascension underneath like Luthadel, and like it did used to be in the Terrace, like the Terrace religion. I mean the Terrace region.
I think super minor nitpick. It's in the same place. He just made the Terrace region flat and put mountains somewhere else. I mean, that's a super minor nitpick. Whatever. Go on.
But there's still mountains there, or else why would they journey there to look at the mountains?
Because he made mountains. There weren't mountains there. He put mountains there. And took away mountains.
Oh.
He didn't move the Well of Ascension. He remade the world.
I see. Yeah.
You could absolutely miss that. Like it's such a minor thing.
It is a minor thing, but my theory was that like every time the Well of Ascension is used, it's moved somewhere, and so like the center of power is moved, like, and you have to like go find where the new Well of Ascension is after his power is used or whatever, and where it's getting filled up. I don't know. So that didn't end up being what happened.
So you said Furakami is like the good version of the Well of Ascension power.
Yeah, I think that the Well of Ascension was used 2,000 years ago. You know, this is assuming that Lord Ruler never took another dip in the last 1,000 years, which like I think it'd be interesting to explore if like it fills up every 500 years, or it fills up way more like quickly, and he's just been incrementally like fucking this world up like over and over again, and like making it more like whatever he wants. But I don't think it is. I think maybe it only fills up every 1,000 years or whatever. And so I think like 2,000 years someone went there, took the power, made Furakami, and then like 1,000 years, what's his face, took the power, made Allomancy, because it seemed like, I don't know, there's like, I don't know where I'm getting this. I think there was like some implication where like Allomancy didn't exist before, whatever. I'm not really sure. Oh yeah, it was because in the first book, the author was never really like comparing Furakami to Allomancy, like talking about how similar they are, and so I was like, oh, that makes me think that Allomancy didn't exist. And so I think that Allomancy was made with this, and so I was like, okay, I read Elantris. I know he wants to add more new ways to like use metals to do magic, and so I thought, okay, at the end of this book, they're going to go to the Well of Ascension, and somehow a third new kind of a whole different magic system is going to be born from the use of the Well of Ascension, and now there will be a third like way that metals are used. And then I was disappointed.
I wonder if now that you've actually finished this book and we're going to go into the next book, is the time for me to say the thing I kept wanting to say. It's not like detailed or spoilery. It's not like super detailed or spoilery.
I mean, if you say the same thing you said to me on our call, yes, but no further.
Okay. You've already seen the third magic system.
I'll think on that. Nothing's coming to mind. Nothing is coming to mind, so I will think on that, and we'll probably... Interesting, I missed that.
I will say it's easy to miss because it is the most flexible of the three magic systems in terms of what it can do. But we will have to get back to that. One thing that we should definitely hit before we finish, can we talk about every single relationship in this book sucking?
Except Breeze and Ham.
Except for Breeze and Ham, our one true pairing.
To me, this entire book felt like forcing two Barbie dolls to kiss each other. Like, just like people who like, they just like, and now they kiss, like, da-da-da, like, see, look how in love they are, even though they have, like, nothing in common, and do not see eye to eye, and, like, ugh, gross.
Yeah, I mean, Ellen and Vin always kind of felt like they were fighting, like, they were fighting to be in love because they, like, almost like they knew they were supposed to be in love.
They seem so codependent to me, of, like, Like Vin loves Ellen not for like qualities or like liking Ellen. Vin is like he fixes me.
Oh, God.
Which is like, I don't like that, don't care for that. And also, like, I guess Zane and Vin have a relationship, kind of. Like, the love triangle there is, like, given to the fact that you love murder. And it's like, Vin is really good at murder. She doesn't seem to love it.
I read it a little more as, like, she obviously loves Kelsier very much, but as kind of a father figure. And then she meets someone who's, like, reminds her. I mean, there's the whole thing where, like, Zane also had survived the pits of Halfsin.
He has
and
not.
was also he had the scars.
No, that's what Vin assumes, and Zane doesn't correct her. He cuts himself.
Yeah.
He's not a survivor of the pits of Halfsin. These are just his own self-inflicted scars.
Yeah, he uses it to, like, ground himself.
Yeah, because there's that scene early on in the book where, like, I almost just said a huge spoiler. Jesus Christ. When God, the voice that he hears in his head, is talking to Zane when he's with Straff, like, to get the voice to be quiet, Zane cuts himself.
I think every speaking of, because I know exactly what the spoiler you're about to say was. Every single time God spoke, I wrote in my notes, or I wrote a highlight that just said "fuck off."
That character's name.
Like, yeah.
Also, just minor fuck off note that I had that I wanted to share, because he's not an important enough character to talk to, but I had in my notes, Penrod sucks. Killing that dude on sight. Hate that motherfucker.
All right, Penrod is the noble that actually gets elected king in the election.
Yes.
And then sucks.
I also, speaking about the relationships, I want to talk about how... So this book is, like, pretty much YA, and, like, there's, like, very adult stuff, but, like, in YA, or, like, in the function of the love triangle, which he has set up, the function of the love triangle is to have usually the woman choose between a man from her past and a man who's supposed to represent, like, her future and, like, going forward and, like, leaving her past behind and, like, growing as a person. And so, like, Elend is the past and Zane is the future, and he kind of, I think it's very telling that this book decides that, like, no, like, she is not moving towards this direction. The direction she was always going is the same direction she should have been going from the beginning. It kind of speaks to the idea of, like you were talking about rebellion and how, like, things should stay the same, or, like, you should be worried, like, I don't know, I thought it was just very, like, parallel that their relationship ended up being, like, she chooses the same guy she always chose, when, like, the function of, like, the literary device is, like, you're supposed to choose the new guy. You know what I'm, like that to, like, grow your character arc or whatever. And so, like, keeping things that it's the same as they always were is kind of, like, also reflected in, like, so many other elements, like how Elend ends up emperor, and how, like, like, in the political sphere, and, like, in the, like, yada yada, you know what I'm saying?
I am so interested. Here's one of the things that I'm interested in tracking across this project. That I definitely didn't think about at all when I was just first reading these books casually. And Graham, it's a thing you always point out, not just in these books, but, like, in other works, like other pieces of media we'll talk about, is a dislike of stories where the goal is to kind of bring things back to the idyllic way they were.
Yes.
And
the restoration fantasy.
Elantris, the restoration fantasy. Elantris does that. This book sort of does it in the, like, well, like, they kind of have this implication that, like, the world was beautiful and nice before the Lord Ruler, and, like, maybe we'll go back to that. Whether or not that happens, or that,
yeah, we'll have to talk about this more when we record our Hero of Ages book, because, like, considering, like, the restoration fantasy in the lens of that book will be interesting to talk about.
But just thinking ahead, I'm interested to see his future books, because I don't know if that ever changes, because it's not something I was paying attention to when just casually reading the books, but, like, I'm curious to track how if restoration fantasy continues being the theme or if it develops in any way.
That'll be interesting to track. And there's one more relationship we need to talk about, and we'll get back to it, I promise. But in terms of like the restoration fantasy, that is another on-site thing for me. I tend to really dislike it. It's weird that I like Delantris so much because that's such a textbook restoration fantasy. But like the thing that sort of upsets me about it, especially when it's an idea of like going back to the way the world was before, when the world is so fundamentally flawed. This is a more sort of contemporary one. I read Station 11, I think in like 2016, 2017, well before we lived through our own pandemic. And at the time, it was a recommendation from a friend. I really liked it. That book is very beautifully written. The prose is excellent. And then I came back to it after the pandemic. I think I read it for a recent American fiction class. Read it like, I think this was 2021, so like right after things opened up again. And I have never been more angry reading a book because it's so desperate to go back to the way the world was before. And having lived through our own pandemic, like that's not good enough anymore. And that's sort of like where I like see a lot of failings in the like conservatism of this sort of thinking of like, let's go back to how things were fine.
Because like if now is a problem, well, that world led to this problematic now we're in.
Exactly. And it's like, and like that's the other reason like this book being so skeptical of revolutions, despite the fact that the revolution worked. Like it was fine. It's so frustrating to me. But anyway,
it was the most painless, bloodless revolution. Like it was like,
yeah,
like literally everyone held hands and sung "Kumbaya" while Vin was executing the immortal God Emperor upstairs.
Yes,
like it was
right,
shockingly bloodless. And also, like all of the soldiers who were supposed to follow the Lord Ruler, like changed teams. Like we get one of the soldiers who changed teams, like in this book.
I know you mentioned there was another relationship you wanted to talk about.
Sazed and Tyndall.
Oh, we touched on them a little bit, yeah. Oh, but also the whole smashing bar. Yeah.
Yes, specifically. Taylor, I want to hear your thoughts on Sazed and Tyndall first, and like, I think you will do a better job of articulating this queer reading, because I'm mostly mad at it, but I want to hear like a spirited defense first.
I don't know how spirited it'll be, but because I did not like. When I was first reading it, before I stepped away from the text, I was like, it feels again like they're smashing Barbie dolls together.
Yeah.
Where like they have very little chemistry. I think she has very little reason to center her life around men. And he likes her because she's beautiful. I didn't love that. That he like talks about her looks, and that's the only reason that's like a very like large reason why at least in his thoughts, that's the reason why he articulates. I think obviously he admires her for a lot of different reasons, but like inexplicitly like really like talking about why he likes her, he usually is like, look at the way her like earrings glitter in like the light, and like look how pretty she is and stuff like that, which I don't think is true to the character, and I feel like was very forced. But then again, I was like she doesn't center her life around men, and then there's also this weird thing going on where he doesn't see himself as a man. He's like, and like because he's a eunuch, and like that's very weird to like play around with, but like it's like almost in a way like then I stepped back from it, and it's like, of course this relationship wouldn't look like the way I see relationships, because what their relationship is very fundamentally like what they center in their relationship should be very, very different to like what like Vin and Elend might center in their relationship, or like what like and like less queer, more heterosexual relationship would center. And so like I think it's interesting to see like this asexual, like, I mean, it's asexual because of like reasons that was like forced upon them, which sucks.
I think they in the text they call out that like Sazed is insecure about the fact that he doesn't have a manhood to use in this relationship, and then Tintwill's like, you know what? I kind of prefer that.
Right, exactly, and it's like there's like something I think that's like strangely queer about that, and that at the same time, I don't think Brandon Sanderson, when he was writing this, had any intention for it to come off in that queer way. And so it was really never explored to the extent that it had the potential to be explored to. And I think that it was just very off-putting when Sazed was like centering like very heterosexual things in their relationship and like forcing that to be the center of their relationship, when I think it would be a lot more natural for their relationship to be a lot more queer than it ended up being.
Yeah, that's one of the things that like I think there is a version of this that is really good, and maybe it leans more into the queerness. Maybe it's just built to more because like
absolutely,
like it comes out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
Like, Sazed is constantly talking about, like, I respect Tintwill so much. Like, Tintwill is one of Sazed's students before he becomes a rebel. Like, he specifically says, I'm the person who gave her, like, full copper mines. Like, I'm the person who trained her in becoming a keeper.
I missed that.
It's like a throwaway line. It's, like, such a small...
Well, because it was, like, after she got out of the breeding program, and she now, like... had the freedom to fully become a keeper. He was the one that stepped up to. He was the one that stepped up to be like, okay, now let me catch you up. Yeah, let me catch you up on the training you missed because of your sacrifice.
Far later, yes, I remember that.
So I wrote like a fucking novel about this. Of like, I do see how the idea of like a eunuch and a survivor of this horrific sexual abuse coming together in like an asexual romance could work really well. But again, like, it's not at all present, and then in one chapter, we get them, like, talking about their feelings and starting a relationship, even though it's, again, only been established in this chapter. And, like, I don't want to say that Sazed should not be allowed romantic love, but, like, from everything we know about him, it's not a priority.
No.
And if we wanted it to be a priority, ground that further from the beginning of the book. Ground that Absolutely. In Mistborn, ground that in the early parts of the Well of Ascension. Like, and I understand that he's like, this is the thing for other people, but like, the intimacy that Tintwill and Sazed have is like more interesting than a standard romantic relationship. And
yes, absolutely.
And one of the things I have is like, I think we as a society privilege romance in like the real world and storytelling because like a romantic relationship develops more quickly and more deeply than other kinds of relationships. But also, Jack, I've known you for 10 years, and I would say you are more important than about 95% of the people I've dated to me. And, like, we have a deeper connection than, like, I would say most of the people I've dated. And it's like, the intimacy is very different, but, like, it's not any less valuable. And like, it's just this sort of thing of like, why does every relationship have to end in a marriage? Why does every character need to be married off? I mean, Ham is married off. Like, Clubs is the only bachelor.
Yeah.
And it's just
most desirable bachelor in Luthadel.
It's true.
I think you should keep going further with that point. I think it's a good one.
It's a thing where I feel like it's a tendency in a lot of fantasy. Or just all media where romantic love is treated as like the love you're striving for. But I mean, we have great, amazing examples in fantasy of like incredibly intimate, non-romantic relationships that like are super powerful. I mean, Lord of the Rings is like the go-to example for that.
No, that's romantic. Frodo and Sam are romantic, Jack.
I wasn't just talking about Frodo and Sam.
True.
I was talking about like
Gimli
Aragorn
and
Gimli and Legolas, Aragorn and Boromir, kind of having like a very tender moment.
Yeah,
having like tender moments and stuff. But it's something I kind of. But also, I mean, now that I think about it, there's a little bit of like audience participation in that tendency as well. This is jumping forward a few books, but like, there's the tendency of people to take characters that are just explicitly friends and kind of like apply this romantic filter on top of it. And we were kind of doing that ourselves with all of our jokes about Breeze and Ham.
No, that's a good reading. Taylor is right.
No, but like literally, like we joke that like, oh, they make a great like gay couple or whatever, but textually they're not. They're just really
Ham has a wife
friends
and kids. Yeah.
They know each other really well, and they have this kind of intimacy and connection with each other, this softness and caring. And honestly, just to call ourselves out, the first thing we did was like, oh, they're gay for each other. And it's like we did the thing we were just complaining about.
Yes. And like, I think that may just be like, at least for Taylor and I being queer, and for you having so many queer friends.
Yeah.
But of like going for that. But like, yeah, I don't know if I have any further points about Sazed and Tindwyl, but just like, it's not that I don't wish it. I wish it wasn't there. I just wish it worked for me. And the other thing that like is kind of worth mentioning is, again, these are the only two black characters that we get in the book, and like the fact that they have to end up in a romantic relationship together is like also disappointing. Because again, like the intimacy of like a teacher and student, or the intimacy of colleagues, or like the intimacy of just like two people working together, or like longtime friends, is different. And I really wished this worked for me.
It can hold the weight. It can hold. I think if they, I mean, to me, I had very hard time buying into their relationship.
Yes.
And so seeing them, I pretty much always in my mind saw them as friends and not really like romantic interests, even though I know I was supposed to.
Yeah.
And like, I wish there's just very little chemistry there romantically, I guess, but there's a lot to be explored with friendship. And like, you're right, friendship is just as intimate and just as like, and can be just as heartbreaking. I mean, he even makes this point in the book with like how Breeze responds to Club's death. Like, friendship is like enough, and is like.
What was one of the last things Kelsier said to Vin? You have a lot to learn about friendship.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I just. They worked really well as like close, intimate friends, and I don't know. You're right.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say about them. One last thing that I do want to hit. I'm not going to go on a full rant about Elend becoming a Mistborn, but
you can save that.
I just want to bring up the idea.
We're gonna have a whole book of him being a Mistborn.
Yeah, so like it'll pay off more, but like part of the reason I don't like it is Elend is, while I don't think his political maneuvering is very interesting here, his whole arc is about learning to become like a sure and competent person without being a wizard. And there are like two characters we have who are not wizards who are competent. We have Elend, and we have Doxson. Also, Doxson should have been king. Don't at me.
Wait, there's even the part, now I'm remembering, there's even the part where like Elend's internal monologue has him being insecure about the fact that everyone around him has powers and he doesn't.
Yeah.
And then the resolution to that isn't he learns to find the competency he does have, like his understanding of like political structures and stuff. It becomes, no, that whole insecurity is resolved by him becoming a Mistborn.
Yeah, and it's just so frustrating to me that, like, again, Sanderson is incapable of conceiving of a competent person who is not a wizard. And, like, the only people who have power are superheroes. And it's just disappointing. Because, like, I think there are books that do Elend's arc better. I mean, like, not to keep comparing it to Game of Thrones, but that's popular, so I'm going to keep using it as a touchstone. But, like, Elend's arc is the same as Jon Snow's, of, like, learning to become a competent leader who, like, sometimes has to go against his own honor to get things done. And, like,
Mhm.
I wish it paid off more in that sense, because Ellen gets, as you said, Jack, to have his cake and eat it too. But the fact that, like, he ends up being a special person with powers too is just... it's so disappointing. And...
Yeah. Falls flat.
Yeah, and we'll really get into it in the Hero of Ages, because, like...
It almost feels like Brandon Sanderson is just ramping up for, like, big epic fantasy shit to start happening in book 3, and he's tired of writing about how Vin has to spend all this time protecting Ellen. So it's like it almost feels like the book I have planned. Ellen would not survive without superpowers.
But also, Ellen beats up a Koloss and wins. Like, he's become a pretty good fighter pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's not a ton to say about it. But the Koloss are like these weird monstrous race of men with blue skin that the Lord Ruler have created. And I just want to say, I really hate how they're written. It so deeply reads as, like, racist to me, of, like, in the same way that, like, orcs read as racist to me.
So we didn't talk about them that much, because despite them being a big part of this book, they were effectively just a natural disaster waiting to happen that everyone was preparing for.
Yeah.
Next book we will actually explore the Koloss more.
Okay,
which I guess I get excited for that.
That's
we'll
good.
learn where they come from and, like, all of that stuff. Like, we'll
It was
because right now they are literally just a natural disaster. They're a
I don't
unstoppable army of super soldiers that have, I think it's like they only have 2 emotions: bored and enraged.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like-
and I mean, I wanted to talk about this a little bit because obviously, like, dehumanization in, like, a slave society was something huge that was talked about in Mistborn, and so in this book, I explicitly, like, was like, I had a specific tab dedicated to, like, when people dehumanize other people, and so, like, it was interesting to watch the arc of the Kandra where I don't think I mentioned this, like, earlier, but, like, the Kandra only got to be humanized when the Kandra was a dog, not actually a human.
Yes.
So that
Which
was like,
is
that
funny-
soured
Which is funny considering
a little
all
bit.
of the fantastic conversations the Kandra and Vin had relating to each other
Right.
about objectification and being dehumanized.
Yes.
But she could only start listening to him, she could only stop being uncomfortable around him if he was the beast that she saw him as, and then worked her way back from that to humanize him, and then...
Which, you could call it an interesting arc, because it is something she grows from. It's not just like a casual,
Absolutely.
like...
Oh yeah, I'm
Like,
happy that
yeah.
got explored and resolved. But the Koloss are called the cousins of the Kandra. Elend goes to camp. He's talking to the Koloss, and the Koloss is like, "I'm a human." Like, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." So I think by the end of this, the Koloss might be a bit humanized, and then, like, it seems like it's working up, like, to, like, humanizing potentially the Koloss, and then all of that is just ripped away in the last 2 parts.
Yeah,
I
and
will
also
say,
just to
remember-
elaborate...
Remember that this is book 2 of 3. Like,
Yes.
the story's not over.
But also, I
Yeah.
specifically want to talk about the Koloss, because, like, while I'm not remembering a ton of what is happening with the Koloss after this. What I remember of the Hero of Ages is the ending, and I basically remember nothing else about the book. So that'll be interesting for us to reread, or for me to reread, rather. But this is playing into some, like, 1, racial stereotypes, and also 2, like, colonial ideas of, like, we can civilize the savage and stuff like that. Of, like, that's specifically one of the things that the person controlling the Koloss army has promised them, is, like, if you go to Luthadel, you can become human. Is part of the way he's controlling them, and he's specifically giving them fake salaries.
Yes.
And that's how he's been
like
controlling
wooden chips that are painted to look like coins.
Yes. Also, another thing that, like, this guy controlling the Koloss army, I forget his name, but he was one of Ellen's friends. And as he's become evil, he's also become ugly. And it's like, all right, Sanderson.
Yeah.
The Harry Potter effect strikes again.
Yes. For the record, fuck J.K. Rowling, just so we have it on record.
Yes.
Do we have any final thoughts? Or
I think the last thing at the very end is I want to talk about my predictions for Hero of Ages. Okay, so first I'd like to talk about how I was right that the big bad scary creature for the next book that I predicted at the end of Mistborn was that it was going to be the Koloss. I think it's other than that, I mean, Vin, I loved what they did with the hero. Like I said that Vin was going to be the Hero of Ages. I love what they did with that where like the Hero of Ages could be anyone, and I love that also Orsier talked about that too, where he was like, prophecies are just meant to be broad and vague so that whoever shows up gets to, like, the people can believe in. So I really like the way prophecies worked out in this. Other than that, though, I didn't really have... I still think there are 16 medals, but I feel less like, at least by the end of this book, I feel less like that's like a surprise anymore, because if you look at the back of the book in the Ars Arcanum, it's like a wheel, and then like there's only like a fourth missing out of the wheels. So I was like, okay, I don't know. That seems like he clearly wants me to at least think that there's 16 now. So for next book, I think so when he went back, they went down into the where the Well of Ascension is, and there was a map, and Statlin was circled, and I think obviously that's going to be super important. I thought at the time that maybe that's where he was planning to put the next Well of Ascension, because that's when I thought the Well of Ascension like bounced around or something. And I think that's just where the Atium is, where that huge reserve. He actually didn't have it in Luthadel. I think it's in Statlin, which is like a small town outside of Luthadel. Oh yeah, I already talked about how I think that the Well of Ascension has filled before, and like what I think that resolution is. I think there should be the alloy of the metal that makes you a Mistborn should be a permanent loss to all allomancy forever. I think that would be a devastating metal if it ever got like circulated and forced into people. And would be interesting to look at. And then like related to that, like since there's the metal that takes away the aluminum takes away, and then beryllium like enhances. So I thought, and then I found out this one like makes you a Mistborn, and I am assuming takes away all allomancy potentially. That like the final slice is going to be titled like Power or something, because like there's like the like emotional, like there's like like the time magic, and then there's like I think this is gonna be like power magic. And The last thing I have to say is about the spikes. I think the spikes are super fascinating. They clearly have something to do with communication, and there was a throwaway line where they found a bunch of spikes in the Koloss. Like there's metal spikes in the Koloss, just like there was a metal spike in Zane, which we didn't talk about. And I think that the spikes allow you to have some sort of communication. Also, Marsh knew that there was not going to be any Inquisitors. In the thing, so that also makes me think that it has some sort of connection. But when he was in it and they were all at the torture chamber, I'm really putting on my tinfoil hat here. There was spikes of different metals that were laying around that they would make Inquisitors. And so I think that next book's crazy big thing is that there's going to be like OP Inquisitors that are even crazier because they have like different metals. Or on the flip side of that, which would be less fun, I think he's gonna do that, but there's like on the flip side we might find out something like every metal is like a variety of different metals are represented in the Inquisitor's body, since they have like 12 I think spikes or something like that, 10 to 12, I'm not really sure. And maybe those are communication connections. I definitely think that all the Inquisitors are talking to each other in their brains. I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about like also what the Inquisitors ultimate goals are, because I guess I really hope the answer is not just like it's their religion. That seems like the lame answer. I hope it's like
not to interrupt your predictions, but one thing I do sort of find interesting is that this sort of document that Quan writes down in Steel does seem to be the beginning of the Steel Ministry, the religion of the Final Empire.
Oh yeah.
So like that is another sort of interesting track of the religion of like it actually does this like horrific oppressive organization has like a noble origin is like sort of an interesting thing to track for Sanderson's writing.
I know, but then like, oh my gosh, and I was also trying to figure out who the Mistwraith was, because I was like, there's no way that like this is not just like a person. And like I thought I know Sanderson wanted me to think that like a god was the Mistwraith. So I was like trying to figure out like, or the Mist Ghost, whatever.
This will be interesting to revisit.
The Mist Ghost, I was like, the Mist Ghost is like doing all these things. She like the thing clearly hates Ellen, or like clearly hates Vin, I should say. Like looked at Vin with like hateful eyes and was like telling Ellen to leave and like trying to get Sazed. So like in the end, when it turns out that like the Mist thing was like actually against the deepness, I was like, I knew at that point that it wasn't God yet, but like, which one of those Steel Inquisitors is like talking in this poor Zane's brain and like has the time? Who has the time for that?
He's midway through killing some random terrorist man, and he's like, "Oh, gotta check in with Zane real quick."
Yeah, what the heck? I was thinking that it was someone who, I was like, who has the time for that? And like someone maybe imprisoned, someone who's like, I have no
Theoretically,
clue.
this has been going on for a long time too. It's implied that Zane has like kind of always had this voice. It's like the way he thinks about it is like,
yeah, I think it's definitely related to the spike, and I'd be interested to see if literally any new information about Zane comes out, because I want to know how he snapped and if it had anything to do with that spike that's in him.
Oh, one other just like little small detail that I just think is fun character writing is Elend, as he gets more training from Tindwyl, picks up terrorist mannerisms. We know how both Tindwyl and Sazed will often say something and then go, unfortunately, or they will say, I think, after a statement or something like that. And Elend starts to do that too.
Cool.
And listeners, there's a reason I'm foregrounding this statement now, and I will not elaborate.
Oh, okay. Fascinating.
I think the predictions are a great place to end it.
No, we have to rank them. We have to rank our books.
Oh, wait, we have to rank them. Okay.
I'll go first. Mine is easy. I still think Elantris is my favorite thing we've read so far. And then
really?
Yeah, but in terms of what I like about it, I don't think it's the best book, but it's the one I liked the most.
Yeah.
I would say Mistborn is probably the most solid book we've read so far. And then Well of Ascension, I didn't really care for all that much. It's at the bottom of my list, which again is only 3. I'm sure there will be worse books as we go along, but and better books as well. But Well of Ascension, I just think is like too long, and as we've had a 3-hour conversation about what we liked and didn't like. So, Taylor, you want to go next?
Yeah, mine would definitely go. I think Mistborn I liked most, then Elantris, and I liked Well of Ascension the least.
Okay.
I guess I'm the controversial one then, because Mistborn first, and then honestly, Elantris and Well of Ascension are tied for me, and a lot of that has to do with while Well of Ascension has lower lows than Elantris, for me it also has higher highs.
That's fair.
So it's kind of like, because the parts I like about Well of Ascension, I really like. Like, I really, really liked all the conversations between Condra and Vin, where they related to Orsier and Vin, where they related to each other. I loved all Sazed stuff, and I really didn't like all the Ellen stuff. But then all of the Elantris stuff is a lot more neutral to me, comparatively.
Yeah.
So I think Elantris and Well of Ascension are tied for me, and then Mistborn's on top.
Okay. And we've already spotted Hoyd, so we don't have to cover that.
And we talked about the next book in
the post-pod.
Next book in the series. But we're also going to read the actual next book of this project, Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians.
Yes.
The book published.
Yes.
One of a couple books published between Well of Ascension and Hero of Ages. Anyone who thought this was a Cosmere podcast, you're wrong.
You are wrong. Once again, we are reading these books in publication order, and you can see our schedule on our Instagram, A Grain of Sanderson Pod on Instagram. But our next book is Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians, and then Hero of Ages, and then Alcatraz versus the Scrivener's Bones. It won't be until September until after Hero of Ages we get back to another Cosmere book. I fully anticipate that next episode will be our least listened to episode yet. My mom is gonna love the episode.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a good time with it. So I think people should come back for it.
Absolutely. I mean, based on the author's note, it will be a fantastic book because that's the only part of it I've read.
I'm excited. All right.
Well, on that note, thanks for listening, people.
Thank you, folks, for listening. We promise we'll have an outro eventually. If we don't have an outro by this time next year, you can send us an email yelling at us. And that is agrainofsanderson@gmail.com. Please email us.
Yes, email us with any questions, thoughts, recommendations, and on the outro thing, email us hate mail if we haven't done that.
Please, yes.
But only about the outro thing, not about anything else.
No, we're perfect in every other way. I think that's a good place to cut it off.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, I was supposed to meet with friends 30 minutes
ago. Jesus, so. Jack. Okay, stop your recordings. A Grain of Sanderson is created by Graham Gilman, Taylor Lane, and Jack McLaughlin. I edit and produce the show. Our logo is by our very talented friend Ven Busby. Our theme music is Goodnight Kiss by Too Mellow off the album Midnight Broadcasts. You can find their work at twomellow.net, that's the number 2, MELLO, and Too Mellow Makes at bandcamp.com. Thank you so much for listening. Hey everyone, Graham here at the end again. I've just finished editing the episode. It is, oh god, it's 1 a.m, fuck. But having finished editing the episode, I am putting our bonus material right here at the end. This bonus material is a little bit longer than our previous bonus material, because a lot more of it is relevant to the book itself. But I hope you enjoy it, and if you don't want to listen to it, that's fine. Most of our primary content in the main episode is over from this point out, and it's mostly just discussion we had before recording our big episode. Thanks so much for listening.
I feel like a good thing to put in this that we don't want to put in the next one is maybe talking about the next book, because it's a little silly and goofy. The next, not Hero of Ages. We'll talk about that.
Oh yeah, right. Because we're not God. Okay, I'm going to talk about this podcast.
This book, Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians.
Indeed.
By Brandon
I don't
Sanderson.
have a copy yet. I don't have a copy yet.
Yeah.
No, it's wild because definitely going to talk about it during the actual podcast, but my favorite parts of Well of Ascension are the parts that are setting up Hero of Ages, by far. Which that is great because we're not going to read Hero of Ages next.
No.
We're reading something else. Oh god. We did this to ourselves.
We did.
I don't know anything about this. It starts on my 13th birthday. Already pretty good.
All I know about it is that it has a small but very dedicated fan base on the broader Brandon Sanderson community. No, it's like a running joke at this point where people will be every year Brandon Sanderson does the State of Sanderson, where he talks about the last year of books and talks about upcoming projects, and there's always kind of a group of people who are this year he's going to tell us about the next Alcatraz book. This year it's going to be
But he did put out one recently.
I think
it's a sequel series, yeah.
Oh, I think that's new.
Let me look at the
well, there's Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarian series, and then
2022.
Okay,
This came in the box set that I bought.
What's the title of that one?
This one is written with Jancy Patterson.
Okay, yeah. She co-wrote some of the what's the space one?
It's called
Skyward. She co-wrote some of the Skyward short stories.
Interesting. It's called Bastille versus the Evil Librarians.
Yes, exactly.
But it's called Book 6.
the State of the Sanderson 2023, so the most recent one, the Alcatraz, or maybe I'm thinking of Reckoners is the one that has no, it's Alcatraz.
I mean, they
2023
both have
one,
dedicated fans. I mean, there are some people who are like ride or die for like one specific like short story that Sanderson has written. So, and we'll get there.
That makes me happy. I think I'm excited. I'm a little bit more excited knowing that people are so excited
Oh.
about this series.
Okay,
I thought
so
it was
yeah,
obscure.
Oh no, so the book that came out in 2022, I think that was like the long awaited. Like took a
Yeah.
really long break on it.
Yeah, it is a pretty long break.
The only thing I know about this is I opened up my copy and read the author bio at the back of the book, which is masterful, and I'm just gonna read. Brandon Sanderson is the pen name of Alcatraz Smedry. His Hushlander editor forced him to use a pseudonym, since these memoirs are being published as fiction. Alcatraz actually knows a person named Brandon Sanderson. That man, however, is a fantasy writer and is therefore prone to useless bouts of delusion in literary form. Alcatraz has it on good authority that Brandon Sanderson is actually illiterate, and dictates his thick, overly long fantasy tomes to his potted plant, Count Dooku. It is widely assumed that Brandon went mad years ago, but few people can tell because his writing is so strange anyway. He spends time going to science fiction movies and eating popcorn and goat cheese, separately, and trying to warn people about the dangers of the Great Kitten Conspiracy. He's had his library card revoked on 17 different occasions.
Oh my god. This sounds like it's a lot of fun. I'm actually really excited.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm reading the Graham, you were the one saying that you're hoping Alcatraz is going to be like the sleeper hit. Like
Really?
of all the
You were
books.
saying that?
Yeah, I hope it is.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm also excited to like deeply literarily analyze this text as well. Like
You're opening up Lightning Thief, like the first book of Lightning Thief, and you're just like, let's crack into this thing.
I mean, that would be a fine
mean,
one
you
to do.
could.
It's working in Greek mythology. It'd be pretty easy
True.
to analyze that.
No, looking at the publication dates though, it's like, yeah, so 2007 for the first, then 2008, then 2009, 2010, then 6-year wait for book 5, 2016, and then another 6-year wait for Bastille versus the Evil Librarians. So there was like huge breaks.
I wonder what possibly Stormlight Archive he could have been working on in that time that would have caused such a long break.
Okay. Oh yeah. God, we really aren't jumping into. God, I feel like that just hit me that we actually do have a little bit before we actually read Hero of Ages.
We're not reading Hero of Ages until June.
Yeah.
Or that's when the
Well,
episode goes out. We'll be reading it
Yeah,
in
the
May.
episode will be in June. Yeah.
Yeah. I still have to
Yeah.
finish Well of Ascension. I still got about 50 pages.
But that's like the
Oh, okay,
whole
but yeah.
last part.
Yeah, I know. But whatever. I can finish it tonight.
Oh my god.
That's like my favorite part of the book.
Through,
The last part is my favorite part of the book.
Yeah.
I would like to bring up something a little unhinged that I don't think I'll bring up. I would want to bring up in the podcast.
Okay,
Go
please.
for it.
enlighten
Go
us.
for it.
Breeze is so gay. What the hell? Oh my god. The most chemistry in this book is between Breeze and Ham. Oh my god. They are flirting every time they're on the page.
For all the haters saying Brandon didn't put any gay representation in his books until like I don't even know, like I think Way of Kings maybe, or Words of that's the one that comes to my mind is a random like a random background character in Stormlight Archive. But nope, Breeze and
Breeze is so gay for Ham and Clubs. When Clubs dies, I'm literally writing on the page, I'm like, oh no, his boyfriend's dead and his other boyfriend came to save him.
Oh god. No.
He is I was shocked. I was so shocked. I was sitting there the first Breeze chapter. It was like I was like, I cannot even believe he's writing this. Like they have instant sparks, instant chemistry, instant like banter back and forth. I'm like, and you have two other characters that are supposed two other couples that are supposed to be in love. No one here is in love except for Breeze and Ham.
It's true.
And Clubs. The
Yeah.
three of them are a beautiful throuple.
I will say, I think that conversation between Breeze and Clubs in the Breeze point of view chapter might be my favorite conversation in the whole book.
Oh my god. So much chemistry.
Yeah.
It's like that one and Vin's conversation with Orsier that are like up there. Like Graham, I'm looking at your notes and I just see I'm so excited to talk about this tomorrow, but I just see you mentioning the dressmaker constantly.
I think, okay, like, this is something I'm going to bring up on the main episode. Brandon Sanderson is really good at dress-up scenes. Like, he's not...
Really good at dress-up scenes, really good at writing gay characters who are definitely not gay.
Well, no, here's the thing. One of my favorite things in fiction is watching a character get ready for their job. Like, Jack, I'm gonna bring this up on the main episode as well, but do you remember that scene in Andor where we get to see Luthen go from, like, this guy who's, like, super competent spy,
yes.
and then he puts on his outfit
yes.
to become the, like, the...
artifact salesman or
Yes,
whatever.
exactly. And, like, watching that is one of my favorite scenes in the whole fucking show.
It's good. Him, like, practicing his, like, dopey smile in the mirror.
Yeah, and the fact that he has to get, like, the pose right, and then he can fall into the character.
So I found it. That's the end of part 4. So I have a whole, slew of, like, very important predictions, things I actually think will happen. And then my final prediction is, Breeze and Ham will confess their love for one another and ride off into the sunset, and this will turn into a very different book. Or Breeze will confess his love to Ham and Clubs, and the three of them will become a power throuple. That's my prediction.
That's the book we deserve.
Too bad it didn't happen.
Oh, thought I just had... I know we're going to talk about this more, but, like, the kind of, inherent creepiness of emotional allomancy. Like, in a way, isn't Clubs kind of the only, like, properly consensual partner Breeze could have, because here's someone that is immune to your emotional manipulation powers?
I mean, that's kind of the reason that, like, Breeze says he likes Clubs, is he's like, I love soothing, it's part of who I am, but it's also work, and I don't have to work around you. How romantic.
Or it's like, it comes so natural to him that he, like, can't help but do it, but then with Clubs, it's like...
I literally can't.
It's like a new experience, like he can't touch he doesn't know what he's feeling.
Okay, now I have to check AO3 and see if the brave folks there are doing Breeze and Clubs fanfiction. So sort and filter with Breeze.
If I see a single, like, Breeze and Vin in there, I'm gonna throw a table.
Some of these I cannot read on pod, because even though I mentioned public blowjob as a tag, these are much more explicit. Jesus Christ.
Breeze and who?
Breeze is just tagged in this. He's not, like, a pairing. The only interesting pairing in this one is, Vin and Spook, or Lesta Bonus.
Wait, I just found one Ham/Breeze.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, Breeze and Hammond. You're not alone, Taylor.
It's so obvious.
The one I found is called The Dangers of Tin.
Ooh.
Accidental voyeurism is one of the...
Wait, I already mentioned them. Shout out once again to Happy Honeybee on AO3 who did the coffee shop AU. Because in theirs, Breeze and Ham are the pairing. Also, Dachshund and Kelsier is a pairing.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh god, the one I'm looking at is literally it's Vin practicing her tin at night while at club shop and hears something she didn't want to.
Oh my god. What a distillation of the moment we're in. Okay, this is one that appears to be entirely in Spanish. But the tags are Breeze, X Hammond, X Kelsier, X Sazed, X Asterion from Baldur's Gates.
Honestly, Asterion and Breeze, they'd fucking go together.
Oh my god. Taylor, are you feral for Asterion like the rest of the women in my life?
Unfortunately, I have a fondness for Lae'zel. I like when she's mean to me.
No, I understand.
That's why. Oh god, I think I started planning to go with Lae'zel, and then, okay. My first playthrough, I did Shadowheart, and that was like fun. I thought it was a cool romance, and then, second playthrough, I went for Karlach and actually fell in love. So.
Aww. Here's how I read it. Breeze? He couldn't move to see who it was. Sounds like Ham. That's funny. He should be dead too. Lord Ruler, Ham said, coming into Breeze's view. He wore a bloodied sling in one arm. He fell urgently to Breeze's side. Breeze, can you hear me?
I'm loving this reading.
Oh, God. After a whole book of them talking about, or Breeze talking about how much he hates Ham and how annoying he is.
Of course, that's the tension. That's the romantic tension. The romantic tension is they are, oh my God, they're so... Who do you love more than your enemy, you know?
That romance is... No. Okay, well, here's the thing. That enemies actually in love with each other romance is way better than the real textual, intentional one in the book.
That's what I'm saying! That's what I'm saying!
We're going to have to talk a lot about romance in this one, which is weird because none of it's very good.
Oh, I know.
We got a love triangle. Woo! We got a love triangle that actively made me mad while reading the book.
Yeah.
Just like...
We're not going to get any... actually, going back in conversation briefly, I don't think we get any trans representation for a while, but we do eventually in the Cosmere.
Explicit trans representation where like they are like textually trans. I think the first example is Rhythm of War.
Okay. I thought there was like a novella that had something in that. You mentioned that to me once.
Are we reading that soon?
No.
Oathbringer? Oh, no, not for a long time.
Let's see when we're reading Oathbringer now that we have the full schedule.
I mean, I might be misremembering. There's one character in mind I have that
there's
like
one
from
that starts with like Oath or something. Let me look.
Oathbringer is very late.
I think this would be a great time to plug our new Instagram.
Oh yeah, we have an Instagram.
Grain of Sanderson _pod.
Taylor made a beautiful graphic that has our schedule for the next year.
Oh, you're right. It doesn't happen in Rhythm of War. It does happen in the novella that happens between Rhythm of War and Oathbringer is where, like, the first, like, explicitly trans character is named. There are a decent number of, like, gender non-conforming characters that show up.
I mean, we can talk about the fact
Stormlight.
that the Khandra have genders and how disappointing that is.
Oh, for sure. Warbreaker? Well... Warbreaker is the one that we're reading soon, and that was the one I was confused with.
Okay.
With Oath, whatever.
Just knowing the fact that Brandon eventually starts like adding trans people to his books makes me slightly more. Actually, no. Speaking of the Khandra, I'm more ready to forgive this as Brandon just like being ignorant and like still learning.
Yeah.
Because he does get, I guess, like, very tiny spoiler, he does actually address the absurdity of giving Khandra gender in Era 2.
Okay. I mean, that's something, but
he never, I thought it was just like, Vin was like, you look like a boy Khandra, and then he didn't say no, basically.
Basically, yeah, but I think the implication there is yes, that he is gendered male. Because there is also, I think, actually no, Jack, now that you mention it, I think okay, this is something I've been told. Is there a lesbian Khandra in Era 2? Is that a true fact about our world?
Pansexual would be more appropriate.
Okay.
And also, here's the thing. I guess minor spoiler for Taylor to forget about. There is a.
I'll never forget.
Oh God! Wait, do I don't know how much.
No.
Just
that's all I needed. That's all I needed.
Technically a spoiler. Okay, I won't say anything.
Don't say it. I want. We're not. Alloy of the law.
I
law
can't.
Of the alloy is not that far away.
Although now that you mention it, I am so excited to talk about that character in particular with you two. I don't think she shows up until the second book of Era 2, though.
We'll get there.
Like she
also,
just
for the
doesn't
record,
exist.
we are reading Oathbringer in October of 2026. So
Hell yeah!
Shout out to October 2026.
Oh, also, something that I should ask. How would we feel about having a guest on a later episode?
Like who?
Did we talk about
So I think we briefly discussed the idea of, like, for a book that is more like Mormon heavy, having a Mormon on would be good. Having a special Mormon correspondent. But no, I was just chatting with Sophie, who I mentioned last episode.
Friend of the show,
Friend-
the ever
friend of
quotable
the show.
Sophie.
Friend of the show, Sophie, the quotable Sophie A. And I was just chatting with her, and we were talking about how my mom liked her comments, and then I think my mom started knitting Sophie a scarf,
Cute.
as she does. And Sophie was like, "Well, I would like to at least earn my knitwear. Maybe I should guest." I was like, "Sure, why not?"
Everyone on the Grain of Sanderson podcast has received a scarf from Graham's mom.
It's true.
It's been I guess unseasonably cold, depending on, or it's been unseasonably warm, depending on what you're thinking, how you think spring is supposed to be.
Yes.
And so it's finally been cold this week, and I've been enjoying.
I'm just going to say the name. We'll mark it, and I'll have to ask later. But Maddie was always joking about guesting on the pod, but in the particular context of she did not read the book, but pretends to have read the book.
like you're at class.
Yeah.
That fits in with most book clubs.
For someone with more like Mormon experience, I think I know someone good to. This would depend on timing because he is currently hiking the Appalachian Trail for the next like 5 to 6 months. So depending
If he's hiking
on like,
the Appalachian Trail, 5 months, like he better be in the best shape of his life. Holy shit!
they keep saying 5 months. So the two him and his girlfriend, but
Yeah, have they ever done a long scale hike like this before?
not months long, but they've done week long. I have faith in them. Listen. When I literally have a quest. They gave me a quest. The friend of mine, she handed me a massive bag of dried mangoes when she was moving out and told me, "You have to give these to me when I meet you in the Virginia section of the trail because the timing is going to work out that like when I am back in Virginia, she is going to be going through the Virginia section." Potentially, weird timing, like hard to time that, but
Yeah.
But here's the thing. This guy, he actually did ask to like if he could guest at some point, and I had to give kind of a wishy-washy answer because I hadn't talked to you guys about it. But like he's actually one of our fans. He listens to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for listening. I'm gonna censor your name here, but you'll know who you are.
He is also a huge he is simultaneously in my experience the biggest Cosmere fan I have met and the biggest Cosmere hater I have met. Just on talking to him, and he's ex-Mormon. So
good to talk to. Yeah.
So
specifically
actually,
for the Way of Kings episode.
If we want a Mormon person, if we want someone with a lot of Mormon experience for a particular episode.
Yeah. And he should be done with the Appalachian Trail by December.
Yes.
Yeah.
At the very least.
If he's still on the Appalachian Trail in December, there's a problem.
He's died on the ascent.
He's died. He is under the snow.
Right.
And like, I mean, we talked about that a little bit about how like the ska have no culture, but it feels like there would be more differences in culture to like just being essentially Earth culture.
Also, the other thing that, like, speaking of the ska having no culture and just sort of like the timeline being sort of weird, there's a point where like Ellen mentions that like the Lord Ruler was brutal, but he was also a genius, and it's like, bro, I don't know if he was that smart because like they just invented canning, like.
Oh my god. Ellen can literally suck my entire dick. That guy.
To push back just slightly, well, yes, Lord Ruler isn't a genius, but on specifically the whole just developed canning, I think there literally is a line that calls out the fact that like the Lord Ruler intentionally held back technological development. So like slow technological development, that was like intentional.
I suppose.
It was like Ellen said multiple times, he was like, yeah, like, Lord Ruler was a tyrant, but, he kept his people fed and safe
At least he kept the trains running on time.
He kept the trains running on time.
Jesus, there's a little more to life.
I think. Okay, I can't wait to talk about this tomorrow. Graham and I talked about this on the phone a little bit, but Brandon really had his cake and ate it too with Ellen. It was like he had Ellen like stick to his principles and be the moral guy, like following the law and his principles about fair governance, and then still had Ellen end up emperor.
Mm-hmm.
And like. It's like he managed to do both. It's like, hey, you're both super moral, kept to your principles, but also your wife just made you emperor. So
yes,
it made you emperor without morally staining yourself in becoming emperor.
We will also need to talk about the oh god, I lost my train of thought. Ellen, Lord. Oh, we're gonna have to talk a lot about the Lord Ruler and how like everyone is sort of like, at least he kept the trains running on time. Like, jeez, it's not just Ellen.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
Yeah.
I think
the worst criticism ever.
And like, there could have been an interesting way to approach it, because like, if it was approached from a direction of like, man, we just upended an 1,000-year-old empire, like, everything's gone into chaos, and like there probably would be people that are like thinking like, man, like we prefer when it wasn't chaotic. That could be an interesting idea to explore, but like as far as revolutions go, it was pretty okay.
Yeah, we're gonna have to save a lot of this for the June discussion, because not to spoil too much for Taylor, Lord Ruler gets even more redemption in the Hero of Ages.
Oh yeah, no, we're not going to stop hearing about the Lord Ruler.
Yeah,
on God, this guy.
You learn the most about the Lord Ruler in the books post his death. Then,
well, yeah. I mean that makes sense. But like, oh yeah, I also wanted to say on here, because I don't know if it'll come up. Yeah, the predictions I made were way more interesting than the thing that actually happened.
Give us one of them.
I was putting on my like thinking cap. I was like, the mists don't feel anything. The mists are a power source. They're like they can like both have like, and the deepness is just like a creature that also feeds on the mist the same way the Mistborn do. I mean, this could still be right, but then it was just like, then they were just like in a final boss area, and then it was like, like, I have been freed. I was like, oh, that's what it is? Damn.
Oh, so it's very funny that you say final boss area, because that's exactly what it is. Like, oh shit, the secret level has unlocked now that you've done this mission.
Yeah, like, what the, why did you, oh yeah, I thought that like the mists were like not evil or not good. They were just a power source, and they every force that worked against her in this entire book was like human in nature. Like I don't know. I didn't like that it ended up being that like, well, okay, we have no clue what it ended up being, because, well, I don't, at least, because like things are not resolved yet with like what the fuck the deepness is, but like, I don't know. There's always another secret. I know that.
That's the thing. I haven't to hold back from saying anything other than just it's not the last book in the series. So like,
no, we have 5 more of these to read.
Well, when it comes to like all of the secrets and mysteries Taylor's talking about,
yeah, they get resolved.
That's gonna be book 3. All the stuff you're being like,
oh,
all the once at the end of book 3, we will fully understand what the deepness is and what's going on there.
Well,
another thing.
Okay, fully asterisk, but like
we will
it's
fully
fine.
Understand, and then there will be another book that
adds complexity to it that wasn't originally there, but that's fine.
Yes,
that's fine. That's fine.
We'll be getting to that in June of 2026.
Oh, something
Shout out
that
to June
might
2026.
Something that might be. Oop, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say that another thing that I was like, you know how last time you were like reading through mine and you were like, oh my gosh, you were like obsessed with trying to figure out what the 11th metal is. Yeah, this time I was obsessed with like figuring out where Marsh was, because it got to the point where we're going into the last part and we have not gotten a Marsh POV since the second part, and I'm going, Marsh, I'm going to count to 3 and you better get your ass in here or else you're getting no dessert for a week. and then he showed up and did a bad guy thing.
There is a version of this book that is just about Sazed and Marsh, and it's my favorite book. Because I love the conversation Sazed and Marsh have at the beginning of this book.
Listen,
and then if you go back and you read it all, or like I've been reading, obviously I've been preparing notes, and it's like I caught a lot of manipulation from Marsh that did not trigger anything. I was just like upset in the moment. I was like, why would you talk to Sazed like that? Like, that's so mean, Marsh.
He's your bro.
Yeah, I was like, he can't handle like not having like
he's a soft boy.
Yeah, because Marsh was like did like direct commands. He's like, you will go to Luthadel, and I was like, aw, like Marsh, you're so like quirky. Like, why would you? Why would you directly? That's like his like weakness is that he can't not take direct orders.
When next I see you in person, I want to borrow your copies of Mistborn.
I want you to see these.
I just want to skim through your annotated version of Mistborn.
It's very funny because like
so much.
Your annotations are so much more detailed than mine, because mine are like an underlined section and then a single word that doesn't make any sense to anyone but me. Like, for example, Zane nodded quietly and she saw respect in his eyes. And then I see confusion in your eyes, which I have underlined. This one does not make sense to me because I have this whole paragraph underlined and all I have written next to it is frog. I'm sure that meant something to me at the time.
So it's like that meme where someone's prepping a D&D game last section and it's like looks at their notes and it's like frog tuxedo. It was like goblin tuxedo ? And that's their whole notes for the session.
Oh god, I love that meme. Tiny frog tuxedo. Should we ever get popular enough? I feel like annotated copies of at least mine and Taylor's books, we should like do a charity auction or something for. We'll never be that popular, but I think that would be a fun thing to do.
We can dream.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, I just take a bunch of... God, I need to get better at annotating because I just like don't think about it in the moment. I'm just like having fun, reading my little book, and then I'll remember, oh, I should be like stopping and highlighting things. I did take some notes, but most of my notes are like stupid. Most of my notes are like reacting to like the foreshadowing for book 3, just being like,
yeah, I still have notes I need to go through, and like I really want to like capture like all the stuff that I said, but it takes a really long time to do that, and so I'm gonna prioritize like the predictions I made, and then like also like obviously like the bigger thoughts I had while reading this. But yeah, I feel like that's, I don't know. Oh, this is making me want to go and do my notes now.
Yeah, I still have, at the time of recording, I still have about, let's see, how many pages do I have left of the book? Also, damn, this book is longer than I thought it was. Because... Do you have this
copy? Or do you have the other copy?
Oh, yeah, no, I have the same copy. So I have 87 pages left in the book, which will be easy to get.
Have you even hit part 6 yet?
I don't think so. But like I've also read this book before.
I know. It's part 6 took me like, the last part is only like 50 pages, and I read it today. And it took me like 4 hours to read because of how much I was stopping.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And just like writing everything that was on my brain because I wanted to like predict.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think I'm going to have that much to say about the ending, except I am so furious that Elend becomes a Mistborn. I hate that so much.
I can't wait to talk about that too.
Yeah.
We talked about that a little bit on the phone.
It's one of my most hated decisions in literature. Interesting.
I've already heard this rant from Graham multiple times over the years I've known him, because occasionally it just comes up in our conversation.
Yeah.
This is damn. This
Like,
runs deep.
Yeah.
I have heard this rant from Graham multiple times, and honestly, I mostly agree. I'm just slightly less passionate about it.
Yes. So yeah, we'll get to that. But also, I don't have a ton to say about the ending, because we do get a bunch of like sort of interesting reveals. Like, a lot of this will pay off in June when we read Hero of Ages. But yeah, I don't have too much to say about the ending, and I think a lot of what I'm going to say about the book is like, man, I wish this book was just about the Church of the Survivor. That would be cool.
Yeah, I want to get off.
That's a main episode thing. All right. You got to get off? Play Helldivers with us.
No.
I have books to read, Jack.
will-
I can't play Helldivers tonight.
I will.
No.
I'm sorry, I can't fight for democracy, even though I don't.
Do you have a copy of the game yet?
Walton did download it on my computer, so
Okay,
actually,
lovely.
Yes.
Okay, I'll go protect democracy with your boyfriend then.
Okay.
Wait, add them both. Add them both
We're
to
not
the
doing
Helldiver
anything.
server.
We're not doing anything. We're just protecting democracy together. You don't have to worry about us.
Okay. Oh. Damn. Breeze and ham.
Just defending democracy.
Hello.
Woman who's only encountered one gay fan fiction. I'm getting a lot of Breeze and Ham vibes from this.
That's the inside joke from the rest of the. Anytime there's a new gay
I'm
couple,
getting Breeze and Ham
I'm
vibes.
picking up Breeze and Ham right now. That we gotta.
There are
we gotta
people
get off.
texting me right now to play Helldivers apart from Jack.
Hell yeah.
Anyway, my love to
gonna
you
throw
both. I have a book to finish. Taylor has notes to make and sleep to do.
Enjoy.
Good night to you
Enjoy.
both.
Love
Stop
you
your
both.
recordings and send them to me.
Hell yeah.